Okay, should be live. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. We're live. We are not going to be going live on uh, Instagram tonight. I sent a message to everybody, though, on Instagram. I posted a story just kind of letting everybody know to meet us here just because I want to show models and it's difficult to have my phone in front of the screen. But hopefully this, people just get used to the fact that, it's better on YouTube. It's always better on YouTube. And also just, I don't know, Instagram is weird. It kicks you off after a certain time, and yesterday we went for over 4 hours. I think it was 4.5 hour stream. You have a 4 hour limit on Instagram. So it's better on here because we can just go as long as we want. So today I wanted to talk more about gender a little bit. And then I also want to go over some clips and really got this down, I think, where I'm now able to actually show you guys clips where I don't have to search for stuff, but I've been just creating a log of all these different clips that we can reference and look at. I don't know what the effect of this will be regarding whether or not somebody will try and flag me for some kind of copyright, but I do know the law, and like you're allowed to reference clips and then speak about them. That's fair use. So we'll see what happens with it, though. I know the law. I don't know if they know the law. Let's see who's here tonight, though. At least if you are here, please hit the like button, boost the algorithm, beat the system. It's not really beating the system, but it's close. We try. I didn't know that my logo appears on the stream, though, in the lower right-hand corner. That is awesome. I didn't know that. Is it always there? It's pretty cool. Okay. But where's gender? Yesterday we spoke about gender and how, and then it kind of like just veered off into, all kinds of other places. But I want to kind of stick towards gender again this time and see if we can complete this chart, because I did a little bit more work on it last night, but I didn't finish it. And maybe there are people in the chat that have more knowledge than me. This is the issue with doing work on a like theory of everything type of structure, is because you kind of you can't be an expert in every field, but you also have to be aware of every single relevant structure across all fields. So that's very difficult to do. And some of them are very obvious, but some of them aren't so obvious, and it's difficult. So, but I think maybe for Atom, I guess you would go like, I don't know, nucleus and electron. Because it's an electron cloud. And when I say cloud, they call it a cloud. I like the term, but it's really a wave. There is not multiple electrons in an atom. It's multiple observations of one electron. It's a wave that moves across the atom and across the nucleus, which creates the atom, and interacts with the nucleus. And that electron wave is basically the energy that binds the protons and neutrons together in a way. It's like the sexual energy of men and women that, I can either bind a marriage or can also create, other types of attractions and relationships. That is what an electron is. It's a wave of energy. And that energy is the sexual energy. It's like when you say with somebody, oh, well, we have a lot of electricity, or a lot of chemistry, but it's, here would be an electron. Electricity. But I tried to get this. I think that might be it, or it could be polar and nonpolar. But it's difficult because the reality is that both of these are probably expressions of gender. And it's not a matter of whether or not they are expressions of gender. It's a matter of choosing which one is the correct one to focus on in the chain of generationality, of periodicity that is hereditary, I guess, or a lineage, as we spoke about yesterday. That's kind of what got us into all kinds of topics, but it's because it's linked to all kinds of topics. But lineage is the way, it is the orienting path that you have to use in order to focus on where to go. So like if you're looking around and you're like, well, where do I go with the theory of everything? This is why so many people have so many problems with this. It's because they don't know where to focus. Like, do you look forwards? Do you look over there? Do you look over there? Look over there? I mean, look to a hierarchy. And a hierarchy is a lineage because each one is requiring of the previous, and it cannot exist without the previous. And that is why it is the only path forward. It's not a path that you can choose. You either choose that path or there is no path. There's one path. There's one pattern. There's one path. There's one God. There's one existence. And if you try to go against it, you can't find another path. You just decay. Because you're going towards nothingness. The further you move towards nothingness, the more you become nothingness. So you can't do that. And it's important to just focus on generationality. But we don't think about that in things outside of like, I don't know, genetics or something like that. Because it's just difficult to kind of change your perspective on it, because you have to then put it into an objective context instead of like a subjective context. So a subjective context would be, if you go far back enough, humanity was, related to shrews, or we were shrews essentially, or what. But if you go back further, we were other kinds of organisms, and amphibians, and then fish, and then, I don't know what before that, but something, until you would just go back to the very first cellular life. And then prior to that, though, people don't know where to go. But there is still a logical progression. You just move then to molecules. And that's the jump that people don't make, is that there is a generationality of life outside of just biological life. And when we are trying to focus on just biological life, or just, crystalline life, or, mineral life, or you're focusing on plants or you're focusing on animals or something like that, you're losing context that is objective. It is subjectively true context. You don't deny subjectivity or relativity when you acknowledge objectivity, but you acknowledge an importance when you acknowledge basically that there is this superstructure that is the context of the relativity that then is also generated that is true. But that is, I listened to Eric Weinstein speaking today in Clubhouse, and he was talking about, they were talking about black holes, and I was sitting there listening to all these people talk about black holes. Eric wasn't speaking yet. Brian Keating was in there too, but I didn't hear him speak at that point. But then there was like some woman and some guy who wrote a book on black holes. And they're sitting there and they're just talking about black holes, and they're like, it's just a typical conversation. Is it like, we can't see past the event horizon, but if you send a message into a black hole and past the event horizon, how would you get that information out? It's like, it was, and this woman starts talking about how it's infinitely dense. And I wanted to raise my hand and just be like, please explain infinitely dense. Like, what is infinitely dense? Infinitely dense means either it is ever increasing in gravitational pull or gravitational force or density, or the math broke down and you're just calling it infinity because that's like your calculator broke. When you divide something by 0, your calculator breaks. And really what's happening is that when you divide something by 0, because objectively 0 is infinity, it just is infinity always. So anything that divided by 0 is infinity, other than 0 divided by 0, which is 1, because it's infinity divided by infinity, which is always equal to 1. And I don't think that they think about this. I think that they just think about infinity as like, it's like a way of just saying it's beyond us. But infinity isn't beyond you. It's beyond your ability to know all that, all infinite information. You can't process infinite information, but you can understand the concept of infinity extremely simply. It's not complicated. It's like I kind of rip on like Lex Friedman constantly talking about this. Like, do you think we can contemplate infinity? It's like, you cannot compute infinite information in a finite moment. So you cannot experience that kind of infinity. But what you can do is you can understand the concept. It's just infinite growth. And that's why understanding that the context of everything is in generationality allows you to just make sense of this concept very easily. It's all of a sudden it's like, okay, infinity is just when, growth is multiplying forever. It doesn't mean there's no way. I think people want to contemplate infinite information or the concept of infinity within a finite structure. And if you do that, you're just going to either trick yourself into being like enamored with this idea that there's something beyond your own calculation, or you're just going to realize that you just can't do it and move on and like focus on things that you actually can do. And I heard Eric Weinstein interject and just start talking about how he was like, you guys are saying the same exact thing as what everybody says, and it's just this guided tour of this mansion that is, the narrative of black holes. And it's not helpful. And he's right. It's not helpful. It's led nowhere. Why are we focusing on it? And it's because we get it's like we get off on the mystery. It's kind of like the double slit experiment. It's like, we all kind of get off on, I mean, I don't anymore, but I did, like, on the idea of just like, is it a particle or is it a wave? And your observation changes it. It doesn't change it. It is a particle and a wave at the same time. It's just that your finite capture of information of a wave is a particle. So if you're going to look at a wave and you only see a finite like a wave is going by, but it's going by, and then you just look at it right here, and that's it. You're not seeing that it's like continuing. You're only going to see a point, which is a particle. And that's exactly what's happening. It's the same thing as this thing when I show you all the time, that when I spin it and you ask, like, is it a square or is it a wave? It's both. But it just depends on what question you're asking. It's not mysterious, it's not complicated, but the problem is that we look at our reality and we think that it's objective, and it's not objective, it's subjective. And you can't make sense of a subjective reality by thinking about it objectively. You can't. So, and this is what Eric Weinstein was saying. He was basically saying, like, what if understanding black holes is not the direction physics should go? And thank God he said that, because thank God somebody's saying that, because that's definitely true. You cannot understand the universe by looking to the stars and to the black holes in the cosmos. And we've never even really seen a black hole. I do believe that they're there, but they're not what people think they are. They're not that mysterious. They're not. They're, it's just a twist in, it's just like, it's like if I had a cloth right here, and I was behind the cloth, and I was holding the cloth, and I was twisting the cloth just over and over and over again, because what it was doing was it was bringing information towards the spot. That's what God is doing. He's twisting that information in via that black hole, and basically kind of like those water wiggle things, where you hold it and it kind of slips out of your hand, and because it's infinitely like a torus that just moves. That's what is happening, is that information is like going like this, and then it's spit back out via, this much more complicated process. I mean, it's not that complicated, but it is multifaceted of how you take information that is gathered in the change space, save it to the static space, the heavens, this change space is space-time, and then use that information, that wisdom, to, enhance interaction going forward in, with the next, change space that is occurring, or the change space, or the same change space, but just, in further down the line of causality, I guess, if that makes any sense. But it's the gathering of wisdom. It's the gathering of information and turning it into wisdom. That's the process. And it does seem like black holes, if they're anything other than just like mirrors that kind of let us see the universe as a whole, which you would see a singularity because the universe is a singularity, or a verse is a singularity, or verse or aeon, then when we look at them, we would see like a fiber bundle reflected. And I've showed that before. When you look at the latest photo of a black hole, it's a bundle, and you can see the strands even of the fiber bundle. And so that can, when you look at, though, if somebody was twisting like a cloth, like a sheet, and they were standing behind the sheet and they were just twisting it, and it was kind of like forming this little like vortex in the fabric, it would look exactly like that photo. I don't know where to look. Like the camera's like way up here and my computer's down here, so I think I gotta look right there. But eventually I'll maybe move the computer up. But let's look at this, basically. So if we look at here. I mean, look, this is what I'm talking about. See that? That's the latest black hole photo. Just make sure that, yeah, you guys can see it good. That is someone twisting the fabric of space-time up behind the scenes. It's a conscious action. Gravity is a conscious action by God. It's not a theory. It just is. It is. It has to be the case. It's a logical inevitability. And it is because it is the most fundamental force of manipulation of matter. There's no more fundamental force. And so, if you want to look, I asked myself this a long time ago. I was like, if I was going to look for evidence of God's direct manipulation of something, where would I look? And assume that it's there, assume you can see it. And we don't normally assume we can see it. We just kind of wait for a miracle. But if you have to assume for the sake of argument, so I assumed that I could see it, and then I thought about it, and I was like, well, obviously gravity is where I should be looking. So from there on, everything made sense, and I was able to make predictions about, binding energy and mass defect and black holes, all kinds of stuff that you just it would never have been intuitive outside of that idea. I mean, there's economics implications for that and all kinds of other stuff that we're eventually going to talk about. I've spoken to some of you on the Discord about it, just about my experiment idea. And I think that we can look for evidence of God's direct manipulation, but we're going to have to I don't know, it's going to be tough because whoever first does this hopefully says, if it's me or someone else, hopefully if it's not me, then someone else admits the proper context of the results of experiments that are looking at conscious actions as opposed to just not, thinking about them as conscious actions. They are conscious actions. I was listening to, what's his name? It's in my Clipster reference. It was Richard Dawkins. So I listened to Richard Dawkins. Oh, gosh, that man is so confused. The only thing that I think is really good about him is that idea of the meme, evolving. There is that, it's like but the thing is that the idea that a meme is different from a gene is wrong because you are an idea in God's mind. So you're a meme. And our genes are memes. And so they're just, like we just spoke about yesterday, it is a lineage that evolves and changes in the way that it looks, and the way that it acts, and the way that it interacts with its world. But it's a continuous chain of self-referencing information that moves through time. Just think about it like a snake moving through time. But you are just the head of that snake, and you're in one time, which is, the present. But the body of that snake stretches back all the way to the beginning of creation. And snakes kind of are a perfect representation of this because you go back to the tail and it kind of just ends in a singularity a little bit. But you are just the head of a much greater organism that is moving through time at the same time, simultaneously, I'll say, as you move through space, or you maneuver in space. And it is existing, and you are existing in time, but not just as you. You are just the head of a much longer chain of information. And eventually you go back and you realize that chain is a tree. Branches that were forming this way are then converging, and then that's you go back eventually, and we all have the same stump, and that stump was, made by God. That stump is God, you could say, and that is just a truly contextualizing picture of life. So let's see here who's online. I'll try not to derail you tonight. You didn't derail me. Like Negentropic Phantom. There we go. I'm getting better. You didn't derail me. I loved the conversation. Like, and it's relevant to even tonight. Generationality, lineages are an understanding that is the true context of multiplicity, which is the space between relativity and oneness, is the true context. And that is a very important thing to focus on. And the things we spoke about last night were very important things that I want to use this work to show people. That's more important to me than trying to slip between, temporal dimensions like Eric Weinstein's trying to do. So, we'll leave. I have no problem with the conversation. Like, it wasn't derailed. I went with it because I thought it was a good topic. So, let's see here, though. Any clips that we should maybe look at? Okay. So somebody told me once that nobody is saying that hadrons are sentient beings. And I was listening to Stephen Wolfram and Lex Friedman, and I didn't hear him saying that hadrons are sentient beings, but he does say that it's possible that molecules are conscious. And if molecules can be conscious, then so can protons and neutrons. It's not a stretch at all. In fact, it's inevitable. And this took me a very long time to get through, days. But it's a 4.5 hour interview with Stephen Wolfram and Lex Friedman. It's one of the best interviews I've seen because Stephen Wolfram is very similar to me in his methodology in a lot of ways, but he isn't, at least publicly, overtly focused on God with this, and I am. But I know he does have on his website like let's see this. I want to see what he do you believe in God? This is what he said. He said, I've never read this, by the way. But I'm just expecting familiar, answer. But I just remember somebody sent to me once. They were like, "This is Stephen Wolfram's the implications of Stephen Wolfram's work on the existence of God," and I didn't click it because at the time I was very much avoiding other people's work. I hadn't finished my models, the overview of my models yet. Now I'm much more open to looking at other people's work than I was then, because I kind of, I'm not saying the work is done. It's never really done, but the framing structures of my work are complete, I think. He said, "Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm certainly not an adherent of any organized religion. However, it's an interesting question." Okay, that's not that. Let's see here. What does he say? he considers himself an animist. So what is an animist? I've never like looked that up. I've heard people say it. Belief that objects, places, creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Okay. Well, that's true, but the problem, I mean, if you don't eventually get to a that existence is the animator of everything, then you are wrong. But I mean, there is one animator, but then we are co-animators, but with that animator. So I guess it is a superposition structure. But if you're just focused on that there is, that rocks have spirits, but there is no God, you're way off. Like, rocks don't have spirits. Molecules are animated beings. They are not inanimate. Rocks are inanimate. They are in relativity. But an organism is animate. But you could say, I don't know, that a garden is not animate. It's a collection of animate beings, but it's not animate of itself. It's just like a car is not animate unless you're driving it, but it's not. But the molecules that make it up are. And then you can't do that kind of, you can't know that until you understand, the structure of generationality. It is the way to understand what's coming and what is. You can't do it any other way. But we lose ourselves because when you start thinking of like, what's the spirit of the rock? It's like, there is no spirit of the rock. But there are crystal structures that are alive. This right here. I'll show you this. Okay. Camera. Okay, so this is a piece of petrified wood. At one time, it's a rock now. But at one time, this was, alive. It was an organism that was animate. But it is no longer animate. The molecules that make it up still are. But the rock is not. This has no spirit. This is just like, it's just the molecules in this are entangled in such a way that we are perceiving it as a solid. And that is why we perceive it as a rock. It's a very cool rock. Petrified wood is awesome. You can see the bark on the outside here. Of this, I don't even know how old this tree was. So long ago. And then that would be like the, where the rings would be. It's beautiful. It's funny, when I was a little kid, I went to the Painted Desert. And you're not allowed to take anything from the Painted Desert. And I found a rock that looked, I swear, just exactly like this. And they told us, if you find anything, you can't keep it, but take it back here, and at the end of, you exploring, and we will tell you what it is, and then you can go put it back. And so I took it back. I was a little kid with my dad. Take this rock back. And the guy tells us it's petrified wood. And I wanted so bad to keep the rock, but my dad was like, we can't keep the rock. We said we wouldn't keep the rock, and it's illegal to take the rock, so put the rock back. So I put the rock back. And then on my last week in Flagstaff, I found this rock just like in the forest next to like a neighborhood. And it looks exactly the same as the one that I found in the Painted Desert, which is pretty cool. But this is a geode that I cracked open at like the Gem and Mineral show in Tucson. You can get a geode and use a big machine and crack it. And I'm trying to see if you guys can see. There, yeah. So those crystals grew at a certain time. That was alive. They're no longer growing because the conditions are not, correct to have them grow, but they're growing in a periodic structure. And I would say that that is life. That they're not alive anymore, I don't think, because if life isn't growing anymore, it's not alive. Like, but the molecules that make this up are still alive, but the crystals are basically not. Like, they're dead. It's like if you see, like if a cactus dies and you see that there's the skeleton of the cactus, then that's basically what we're looking at this. It's just that, it doesn't decay the same way as a cactus, but the molecules are still alive, but the crystals are not, because they've stopped growing. And this kind of gets people confused on like what is the right way to look at life. And then we drew an arbitrary line at cellular life for some reason. And I think it doesn't make sense, but I understand why it happened. It's because it's like this: when you look at the jungle or the forest, and you look at plants and they're not moving, it seems like they're inanimate. But they actually are animate and they are moving. And if you put a time-lapse camera there, you can see vines literally fighting with each other, like ninjas. And it's just that things are happening on a timeline, I guess you could say, or at a speed, I'll say that, at a speed that we do not easily perceive as, acting at the same speed as us. It's kind of like if you blow by somebody at 1,000 miles an hour and they're going 50 miles an hour, they're going to look like they're standing still. They're not actually standing still. Nothing stands still. There is no such thing as standing still. You can get a snapshot of reality. Every single time you make an observation, you are getting a snapshot of reality that is not moving. And then you actually are getting many, many snapshots of reality, and then that's what gives us the perception of movement. But any observation is observation of a singular moment, which is just like a photograph. And that just because things don't move in a photograph doesn't mean you didn't take a picture of things that are moving. That's true also of molecules and atoms and hadrons as well. But we don't see that because for us, we can understand the forces that plants are reacting to, even though they're reacting at a slower speed than we would easily perceive. We can understand the forces that are influencing them. But once you drop below cellular life, the forces that these things are responding to, like molecules and cells and hadrons and things like that, we don't easily understand those forces because those forces, even though they actually are impacting us, we don't view them in relativity. So when you look at something and you're like, well, protons they have a charge, and neutrons, they're neutral, and that's a force that they are just, is inherent to them, and that's I guess animating of them, but that isn't them responding to anything. It's like males are protons and women are neutrons, and they are responding to that, and we just don't realize that we have that intrinsic structure as well, and that is gender. And it is an animating force. It is a neutral force that is responsive, and it is a positive force that is, active. And then when you understand that the only way to continue as a subjective being, subject to the objective being that is God, And God is, like I said, he's like that water wiggle thing, like recycling information to some degree. If you aren't growing information via generationality or assisting in generationality, then you will experience decay because that energy needs to still go somewhere to be recycled. And that is what we perceive as entropy. But it's not, that entropy isn't coming from us. It's coming from God. It's it's our job to not even fight entropy. It's to create information. That's it. Like, that's not really fighting. That's the only way you could say fight entropy, but you can't really fight entropy. People who really would try and fight entropy are people who are trying to live forever. And that is cancerous, literally. And that's what that is what cancer is. It's when you are like, screw the system. Entropy is part of that system. What we perceive as entropy is part of that system. You say, screw that system. I want to, live forever. I want to preserve myself as an individual. I want to preserve this group or, dog breed. It's like that. You're gonna lose because, it's like that cell that tries to preserve its own life will end up killing its host, or will end up eventually being cut out if the host is to survive. And you can't kill God. This is like something that I've thought a lot about. So like, for us, when a cell turns cancerous, it can kill us, or we have to cut that cell out. And it's like, I kind of feel like that is like going to hell almost. It's like being banished. It's like, you're not helpful, goodbye. And you're unwilling to change, and you're being cut out. And but God cannot be killed. It's a constraint of God. God, this is that whole question of like, can God create a rock so heavy you can't lift it? The better question is, can God die if you wanted to? No, I don't think so. I think it's such an incredible constraint that if he doesn't grow his world, it's almost like he's imprisoned. And like, that's the only way to escape. I mean, death is not an escape for God. It's not a choice. I'm trying to drink more water. Really bad about it. I like, this is like a weird aside, but I've never drank water really in my life. Like, ever since I was a little kid, I was like drinking juice or Gatorade or something like that, and I never understood why. Everybody else around me in my family drank water, and I don't drink soda or anything like that. I never drink soda, but I'll drink like orange juice or like, Gatorade or something, tea. And I think I realized why is like, I think I'm hypersensitive to the taste of water, and I think our water that we drink is bad. And so Paulina went and got like water filter, and it's much easier now for me to drink water. Like, I actually like it. I used to hate the taste of water, and depending on where I was, like, there are some times when water is the best thing ever. But if it's good water, and or your body's super craving it because you've been outside working all day or something like that. But if I'm just sitting around and all I have to drink is tap water in the city or something like that, my body has like rejected it. It's very weird. But now I have to break that habit that I've formed my whole life, even though now that I have good water. And I think that's what it is. It's like that, and why I also like never slept as a kid, like until I passed out, because I would just try and stay up. And is I think it's just because like at night I can think like it's like there's static of everybody else's minds buzzing now that they're asleep. It's like quietness. I think the sensitivity to things like that are what actually kind of a little bit allows me to do this type of work. That's why I'm bringing it up. But I never thought in my life, like, why do I have a hard time going to sleep? Or why do I like staying awake to think like all night long? And why don't I drink water? And I think it's like, what is it? Paulina calls it like uh, highly sensitive or something like that, but not sensitive as far as like, being, I don't know, easily offended or anything like that. But water is like it's an information. There's something about it that carries information. I was thinking about this last night when I was looking at, you know, uh, gender expressions in molecules, and I was looking at polar versus non-polar molecules, and ionic versus not, and then I was looking at like different compounds that are not molecules, and then I started thinking about water a little bit, and just how these structures basically carry information. I think water is one of those things that it's like when you look at a snowflake, there's so much information in that structure, and that is it is preserving of the infinite pattern of fractalizing existence in water, in just a snowflake. And I don't think that other liquids do that kind of thing the same way that water does. And I also think that that's why water is the animating force of generationality to some degree. Is like, you're not going to have that. It's just, you get what I'm saying. Water is necessary to growth of minerals even, and of plants and animals and us and all kinds of stuff. I think that when you're forcing water through pipes and stuff like that, and even if it's not being added to with toxins, I think that you're still changing the structure of it. And it's interesting. There's like been experiments done of like, if you say negative things to water, supposedly I've seen the results, but I wasn't there to see them firsthand, so I can't vouch for them. But I will say that people have reposted them, and I've read a lot of papers on it, and that basically you can influence the structure of water via ways that seem woo. And woo is very often true. So what's interesting about that though is like, when I had my crazy like out of body DMT like experience, but I was sober, I was in the shower thinking about the universe, and I was underwater. But also, I don't think that was a coincidence. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences at all, but I think that it was very relevant. But then when you look at things like in Judaism, we have a mikvah, which is like a bath where they do, if you convert, you go into the mikvah, or if you want a spiritual cleanse, you go into the mikvah, or if women are like Orthodox women at the end of their period, they will go into the mikvah to spiritually cleanse. And the thing about the water in the mikvah is that there are rules for it. So it has to like touch the earth before it goes. The water has to touch the earth before it goes in. So like it flows over rock, and you can't pump it through metal pipes. It can't be just like a bathtub, because it's like you're forcing the water where you want to go, whereas you have to let gravity, the animating force of existence, manipulate the water into the mikvah in order for it to be a kosher mikvah. And so it has to it has to flow over the earth, and it has to be put into the mikvah via gravity, not via, you know, mechanical, just force, sheer force. I always thought that was fascinating, and I think that it's probably because of exactly what I said. There's something about um, water that allows it to carry information that is not carried in by uh, other liquids and things like that. I mean, look at that. It's the Star of David. It's a square. It's a binary triality. It's got every structure you can imagine. Look at it. It's literally branching in a way that you've got, you know, this is past and future and the present. It's it's incredible. It's just incredible. It's got every objective structure of reality just encoded into it. Do other liquids, well, liquids form snowflakes, essentially? What makes a snowflake special? Chemistry world. See, people will tell you you're just woo. It's like, come on, you stupid. Look at that. And it's funny because, you know, I say this all the time, that when you look at the mathematics of the universe, you realize that there's only one way to make a universe. So there's constraints and there that you cannot violate. Not even God can violate them. He can only make the universe in one way, but he can also have degrees of freedom to make changes, and so do you. You have you have instincts, you have abilities, and you have constraints and limits, but you also, um, you know, have choice. And when you look at a snowflake, it's like people will say, well, you know, molecules can't make choices. What if these different patterns in different snowflakes, even though they are all following the same constraints, that's why you're basically getting the same pattern every single time, but even though you're basically getting the same pattern every single time, there are degrees of freedom that can be interacted with either by God and by the molecules and by the atoms within those molecules that would allow them to create this universe versus this universe. But this universe and this universe have the same laws of physics. This is when people say things like, well, there may be other universes with different laws of physics. Those people are shit physicists. They are. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I'm not trying to be rude or, you know, insulting, but that doesn't mean they have to be shit physicists. It just means they are shit physicists. There's no way for another universe to have different laws of physics. It's impossible. You can have this be one universe and this be another universe, but they're not the result of different laws of physics. They're the results of different choices, but the inevitable structure is always going to be the same. The rules they have to follow is always going to be the same. I think snowflakes are the perfect example of showing this. Like, look, there is none that violate the rules. Except that one looks a little weird. But there are things where, like, there are those instances of, like, where I told you about, where they've, done experiments with water where they changed the structure of it to not be so beautiful because they basically were forcing it into situations. But what's interesting about snowflakes is that snowflakes are caused by the falling of water, which means that it's water being animated by gravity. And when I looked at that, when I realized that, I was like, well, that makes the mikvah make a lot of sense. Seems like they knew what they were talking about. Because that's how we get, the beautiful structure that is the structure of Logos itself. You have to allow God to do that. You can participate in the process, but you can't try and do a new process and force water through pipes and expect it to be the same. I don't think it's the same. I think that maybe that's why water that flows through a filter that's a gravity-fed filter is a little bit better. It might not even be so much the filter. It might be that you're filtering via gravity. Maybe if you used a pump to filter that water, it wouldn't be so good. I mean, it might impact something. We'll look at this in a minute, but I want to see the questions first. Where's OBS? Yeah, I bet you that's true though. I bet you if you forced water through a filter with a pump, it would not be as godly of water. This water right here came from a gravity filter, but not a Berkey, because apparently that's illegal in California or something stupid. Okay. Wolfram will be on Kurt J. Mongol's show on 5/29. I know. I set the reminder for it. It's going to be a great interview. I really expect it to be. I still want to go on Kurt's show. He invited me on a long time ago, but it wasn't a long time ago, but it was right at the point where he just blew up. And I get it. I mean, if you're booking slots and it's like this guy Tyler Goldstein over here, and Stephen Wolfram, I get it. But eventually, I know Kurt watched the interview with Nico Meyer and liked it, or at least part of it. He said it in his Discord. Are the molecules themselves growing? They are participating in the generative structure of growth, but the molecules, it's almost like asking, it's tough because it's like asking, are you growing? There's multiple ways to interpret that. So, are you growing in size? Well, that's actually not you growing. That's your cells growing, but it is also you growing, but it's more that your cells are growing. Your objective growth is when you replicate. And that is something that I'm still exploring, how that manifests in molecules and atoms. I am not nearly as good at chemistry as I am at like quantum physics and yet, but it is the same patterns. It's just you have to find them because it switches a little bit, because at the same time, if everything is reversing itself as you go through these periods, it's also a giant structure that's twisting, if that makes any sense at all. But it's still manifesting the same patterns, but that doesn't mean that it's always easy to see. So I'm looking into it, but that is a good question. But yes, they are. I'm sure they are just like you, but it's just how do like what is that? How is that described? We have to find out how that's described. That's I guess the answer to that question. But yes, what's up, heavy equipment? Um, I'm exactly the same way with water. I drink LaCroix like 24/7. That's I mean I'm not surprised at that. People who are interested in this stuff would probably have a lot of similar like experiences and with all kinds of things, including water. I never drink tap water. It tastes like fluoride and birth control hormones. I collect spring water and drink sparkling water. I totally get that. That makes sense. I think though it's not just the fluoride and the birth control hormones, even though I do think that that's something, and the microplastics that are basically acting like, you know, artificial hormones. But it's also, I think, the forcing of water through pipes that is via motors. It's like satanic water because it's technology that is doing it as opposed to God. In the future, when we have in the Messianic era, we have this coherence that occurs where tech is then under the control of direct control of God. But now it's been given control by God to the beast. And whenever you drink that tap water, it's beast water. And I think that I've always been able to pick up on that, but I didn't know what it was coming from. I love coconut water. Coconut water is good. The craw depends on like the uh the flavor, but it's I'd rather drink that than normal tap water for sure. But what it is I don't think it's that that's healthier because I think that Gatorade is just putting tap water in it. But it's just that the sugar and or the artificial sweeteners or whatever it is, or the natural sweeteners, anything that the taste that you're adding to that is covering up. It's overwhelming our ability to taste the aspects of the water that are not the good aspects of water of so where it's overwhelming our ability to taste the negativity of the water. And I'm aware of that. I'm not like I don't think that you avoid drinking bad negative water, I guess you could say, or dead water. I think that's a good way to call it. It's like it's dead water. It's not alive. It's alive when it's being it's coming from life when it's being manipulated by gravity, aka God. Masaru Emoto was the guy who did those experiments. Okay, well, we'll look at those in a minute. One of those flakes contained at the center the seed of life. Of course. I mean, that is the pattern. Raindrops are also water animated by gravity. Yep. It's hilarious about Satan water. I imagine an apartment where the city is pumped up to high pressure pipes just squeeze into those little spider like pipes all over the building. Yeah, exactly. That's Satan water. It's satanic water. And I think that that's where I've always lived is, places with tap water. And, people that I know with well water, it's better, but I still think that it's like, I think that if you pump water up, then you should have maybe like there needs to be some kind of device but a Berkey I think does do this like that Berkey type of filter. I don't know what the filter's made out of, but if it's made of stone or something like that, or if you would want it to flow over stone, and you would want gravity to be filtering the water after you pump it through Satan water or satanic like pipe system. Yeah, at least you can't taste it. Yep, that's exactly true. Like that's how I feel about Gatorade. I'm like, I know there's shit water in this Gatorade. It's there's it's beast water in the Gatorade, but you just can't taste it. Spring water I get is natural spring, but there is plastic pipe to collect the funnel it somewhat. Um, yeah, that's probably okay as long as like there's other methods of rectifying that later. But yeah, I do think plastic is like, I don't know. I don't think plastic is good for us at all. And I used to be the person who's like, there's nothing wrong with GMOs. There's nothing wrong with plastic. There's nothing. And I think that's insane now, I think. It's not insane. It's just, you don't get it. Um, I was thinking the other day, another topic, but just the other day, but I think I've thought about it a lot over the past couple of years, is there is this passage, there's this rule when it comes to keeping kosher that you don't mix fabrics like wool and cotton or something like that. And to me, I never understood that. I was like, that makes no sense. And I'm not saying that there isn't another aspect to that I don't understand, but intrinsically, I kind of think about that as, I think it means like genetic modification. I think it's saying don't mix, human body with human genetics with animal genetics, and animal genetics with other animals, or like with plants or with something. They make these like glow in the dark rabbits and glow in the dark fish because they mixed them with jellyfish genes, and they just recently, and I'm sure they did this for decades and just didn't tell us, just like Alex Jones said, but they just announced that it is real. They took embryos that they had mixed human and primate DNA, and then they took it to a certain stage, and then they terminated the embryos. But they did the same thing with, actually, I don't think they did the same thing with chickens. Chickens, they were changing the genes to give it a tail and to take away the fur and bring back the teeth, and they were like making little dinosaurs, and they grew the embryos, and then they didn't let them hatch. I wish they kind of let them hatch, but it would have been like, imagine a chicken without feathers but with a tail and with teeth. It's like a little tiny dinosaur. But at least what we think of as a dinosaur would look like probably had feathers, but probably most of them had feathers, like much more throughout their body than we think. But that is different than mixing genes from one, adding it to the other. You're basically like, you're messing with a blockchain. You can't mess with a blockchain and maintain coherence. And we do that with GMOs though, with food. I used to be like, no, they're just making it more drought resistant. And I do think in the Messianic era, then God will be able to assist us in creating plants that can do all kinds of things and still maintain their nutritional value. But in order to do that, in order to change a blockchain and maintain informational coherence, you almost have to be the chain and know every single link in the chain. And meaning you have to have a God's eye view on the chain. And if you don't have a God's eye view on the chain, then you can't change information in the blockchain or in the double helix of DNA without having unanticipated runaway decay because of decoherence. And this is what I think is happening with GMOs, and what I think is happening with, things that we're not going to talk about, but potential future medical things like CRISPR, and maybe even current, treatments. Not treatments, but I'm not going to say what they are because I'll get kicked off the YouTube stream. You know what I'm talking about. Like, things that have never been tested before that are now being administered en masse. Like mRNA related things. Thoughts on the pineal gland? Isn't that where DMT comes from? Like, the thing about the pineal gland that is that I see is that it has that structure. That pine cone structure is generationality. Like, how do you spell it? Pineal. So I'm like penal. Pineal gland. I can't spell at all. I'm terrible at it. It produces melatonin. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you guys can... What is this on? It's on my face. Okay. Here, pineal gland. It's an endocrine gland in the brain of most vertebrates. Produces melatonin, serotonin-derived hormone, which modulates sleep patterns and circadian seasonal cycles, which is basically alternating current. Our sleep cycles are alternating current. You are like the electricity, or you are, energy. For Tesla to have realized that we needed alternating current, it's just brilliant. It's so incredible. Like, Tesla understood the patterns of existence. If you have to, in order to understand the importance of alternating current. You can't in any other way come to that conclusion, I don't think. Whereas Edison, he's like the beast system. He's like, we're just going to force it through pipes. It's like, okay, that's direct current. We're just going to force it through pipes. Versus like, realizing that you need this cycle of work and rest and work and rest and work and rest. I wish, I don't say I wish. I'm working on getting better at that myself. Nearly all vertebrate species possess a pineal gland, with the important exception of a primitive vertebrate, the hagfish. Even in the hagfish, however, there may be a pineal equivalent. I'm sure there's a pineal equivalent. The lamprey does possess one. Those things are the creepiest animals in the world, both of those. There's nothing creepier than a hagfish and a lamprey. Like, for those of you that don't know, hagfish like make this slime when you grab them. Literally, just like starts oozing out of their skin. Look at that. It's just the weirdest, most hideous creature on Earth. And I like snakes. They just eat dead things, but then there's also this. The lamprey is also a creature from your nightmares, and it eats you while you're alive instead of while you're dead. It sucks your blood, the blood of other fish and stuff like that. What a animal of nightmares. It's like a leech fish. That's what they should have called it. Ooh, creeping me out. Weird. Rene Descartes believed that the human pineal gland may be the principal seat of the soul. Well, it's definitely... I think it is like... It is the structure of our bodies where we have the objective logos pattern manifest. Okay, so we are part of that objective logos pattern but we don't experience it in our bodies when we view them subjectively. But when you look at what it looks like, you know, it looks like a pine cone. And this is the pattern of growth, of logos, of order. It's the pattern that occurs when, you know, you run generationality through the you know, the golden ratio. This is always a cool website. So like, you could do things like this. Where is it? I think this is it right here. So this is a cool website because, or where can you do it though? There is a website that, here it is right here. So you can put in all kinds of numbers into this, and you can do like go, see what happens. And I've messed with this before, so I know which ones work like better than others. Go. By the way, that one was one of the best ones that I found. 42. I was like, I bet. But if you do things like, I also tried 333 because, you know, it is what, that's like what 33%, 1/3 of God's energy was put into creation. And then I got this though. What's interesting about it is that it's just a manifestation of triality. But you can mess with this. You can see what you get. If this is 9, I'm gonna freak out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, exactly. I freaking knew it. I knew that was gonna happen because, and not because I've done it before. Probably have done it, but I don't remember. It was like over a year ago. But I do remember 42 worked really well. I think that was the only one I remembered. But why I knew it was going to be 9. Let me show you why I knew it was going to be 9. Because this is how you know that you're onto something and you start to understand mathematics. People will be like, you don't understand mathematics. That's just numerology. It's like, really? Then how did I predict that? Could you? Probably not. And it's because of this. It's like, I think I've seen that. I've done this before, but I need to think about how I did this. So if you go like 4 divided by 9. Wait, what is going on? Hold on. There. So like, when you know that the base of reality is 4 primary perspectives coming from oneness, true, but like, it's 4 primary perspectives that build multiplicity. Then you know that when you divide 4 by 9, which is what happens when you look at this structure, basically, of these models, is you start with 1, and it is a sentient singularity, and it examines the world through 4 primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So it's basically 1 split into 4, and then, and I'm talking about perspective wise, I'm not talking about like energy. Energy would be, it's split into, you know, divided by 3, but perspective wise of examination and, or degrees of freedom, I guess you could say, it's 4. And then Split that 4 into 9. And it's interesting that the structure that is 9 as a count results in 4 as the number of a singularity. And I didn't understand any of this when I did this. Like, part of this was just like, I was just like a conduit. I don't even know. I mean, I know, but it was, I could say God sent me some of this stuff, and because I was trying to put in the work for it in an honest way, I think. But that's what I would think, at least. But it is like, I don't know. Sometimes when I just look back on this stuff and just the fact that I did this, it makes perfect sense because I was trying to like understand the calculation of information. So then it's like, well, you can, in order to turn one into many, which is to take a bit of information and then, deconstruct it, basically. That's a good way of putting it. Then the only way to gain information is via addition and multiplication. And so then that's what I did. It's funny though, is when you deconstruct 1, you get 4. It's weird. But it's contained within 9, so that's why I was able to predict this. From that this would lead to this. Weird, right? It's tough to turn it into words to exactly explain what these patterns, but that's part of the point of these streams, is to learn how to do it. And that's part of what this work is about. That's why I don't just have this. I also have this, showing you the language to describe the structures that are manifesting here. But not only that, I even have this to describe the definition of this. So if you say, what is a singularity? It's inside of inside. What is inside? It's separate and oneness simultaneously. What is separate? It is outside of oneness. That makes sense. What is outside is separate from oneness. What is, oneness without? It's outside of inside. It's just, it helps you understand them. Same thing with these, the 4 primary perspectives. Inside, like I said, separate and oneness. It answers that debate that we can't answer about whether or not a fetus is your body or separate body. It's like, it's both, separate and one. It's both. That's the answer. You can't answer it any other way. This is the objective answer to that debate. It's both. The question is not whether or not it's separate or whether or not it's one with you. The question is, what is your response? What's the right thing to do if you are given responsibility over that situation? And women do have responsibility over that situation. It's been given to them. They have the responsibility over it. I'm not saying doctors do. I'm saying the woman does. I don't think doctors do. It's God is the boss of us because we are inside him. That means we're subject to him. And that pattern follows through with, in the womb and also the cells in your own body. If a cell is in your body, it is under your dominion. But it's one with you and it's separate from you. Outside, separate from oneness. Oneness outside of separateness. That was just the hardest one to do. It took me so long. I mean, honestly, probably like years I just kept changing it, but I think that's correct. But separate is outside of oneness. So it's important to gain the language for these things. Stephen Wolfram talks about this kind of stuff, but I definitely recommend going here. It's math is fun, numbers / golden ratio. You can see all kinds of things. So let's do this. Maybe we'll get 4. That would be incredible. But honestly, if you had to ask what I'm expecting 4. Let's see. No. Okay, 1. That makes sense too, but I would have freaked out if it was 4. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Fascinating. Okay, actually, this one. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're always getting 9, which makes sense too, because that's in CTMU. I've heard too, is that 9 is the number that is like complete. Let's try pi. Let's see what happens here. I have no idea what that's gonna do. Okay. This could be weird. Whoa. It's just too cool. But I just always was amazed at how basically when they say that you want what's the perfect one would be 0.618, which is the golden ratio, 618. Go. And it's just the number, it's the maximum packing, number. But what's interesting is that is also how close this one will get you. Let's try adding another 4 and see what that does, but 42 will do it. And it's really close. Okay, adding another 4 really changes that quite a bit. Whoa. It's pretty cool. Definitely recommend messing with that. You can really see, and this is what I mean by like, it's all about generationality, because when you look at how this is, every single one here is dependent upon the previous. And what's interesting is that when you look at this, if you're looking at it, it looks like this is a pattern. This is like a generation. But then at the same time, it's also going this way. But what's weird is that when you look at them going this way, this is has much less curvature than going clockwise. The counterclockwise is much less curved than the clockwise. I would be fascinated to know if that ratio between this, like, I guess this angle of spin versus this angle of spin, or this length compared to this length, when it is at the same, to the same number like it is here, I guess you could say. What is that relationship? I'm sure it's absolutely fundamental. It might just be that is, the golden ratio. I don't know. That probably is the golden ratio. Is the clockwise to counterclockwise spinorial angle, or angle of rotation, or length of the clockwise to counterclockwise, what's it called? Like chain. So let's look, actually. Let's look. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay. About. Okay. And then counterclockwise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So like 11-ish. So now if we go over here, and we look, say 11 and I don't know, 17 about. What about this? Yeah, it is that, because this is what we're trying to get is 0.618. So, you know, it's hard to get it because the exact number, because when you get to the very center, it kind of like, is it that one or is it that one? It kind of breaks down a little bit, but it's probably what happens when we're trying to examine black holes. But look, how far is that from that? Not. You know? What is... Or... You know, you gotta keep it close though, but it's obviously very close. So that is the golden ratio. Okay, so we understand it. That's pretty cool. I never realized that. I mean, it's kind of obvious when you think about it, but I'm sure it gets more accurate the more layers you add. So this is only accurate to a certain degree because it's only got so many layers. But if you only let it run to right here, it would be even less accurate to try and do it because I'm counting in a discrete fashion versus if you measured it within relativity. So if I took like a ruler and measured this and compared that to me measuring this with a ruler, the clockwise chain, you would get a more accurate measurement, but you also wouldn't understand what's causing that structure to begin with because you're not breaking it down into a discrete chain of multiplicity, I guess. But that's cool. I never realized like how this is representative of the golden ratio. But now let's look at this actually. Go. I just want to try something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-ish. Okay. That's about the same as what we got before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Something like that. So what if this is 13 and this is 17 or 12? Interesting. What is this? That's it. Fascinating. It's just that this is now... Well, look. 42. Weird. That is important. The relationship between 24 and 42 is important too, but when you see 24, you're seeing there's something related to 42 there. Same thing with when you're seeing 42. Why is there's something related to 24, but I can't tell you what 24 is, but I can tell you what 42 represents because 42 is the number of wisdom. But what's interesting is that when you look at this, you'd have to understand it via this context because here's 24 manifest when you put, in an input of 1. You have 24 here, which is it's 2 times 3 times 4. which this is 24 divided by a 3, which is 6, right? No, that's 18. What's 24 divided by 3 is 8. Okay. That's interesting because that's the number of periods that are then manifest here. But this is 432 basically, which is 42 divided by a 3. But then this is 24. Huh. It's just fascinating. Weird. I'm gonna have to look at that later. But that kind of work, like breaking that down and understanding that, is something that just takes hours of silence and in front of a screen. And I don't want to bore you guys too much, but we made some kind of strange discovery. That's pretty cool. A man of culture. LaCroix. Yes. Coconut water is hydration supreme and delicious. Yes. It's the same way it's hard to be productive during the day. I get best work done at night. It's peaceful. Yep. Agreed. All of this was made at night. All of it. All this was made at night. Or at least these were. I did just this one during the day with Paulina like a couple months ago. But this was done at night. This was done very much at night. Like the first manifestation of this, which is right. Where is it? Don't know where it is, but I have it somewhere. Anyways, let's look at this clip from Stephen Wolfram that I said we were going to look at.
You're saying there's a hopeful view of the heat death, quote unquote, of the universe where there's actual beautiful complexity going on, similar to the kind of complexity we think of that creates rich experience in human life and life on Earth.
Yes.
So those little molecules interact in complex ways. That there could be intelligence in that. There could be
Absolutely. I mean, this is what you learn from
that's
this
a hopeful message.
Right. I mean, this is what you kind of learn from this.
Do you see that emotional reaction that he had to that statement? That it's that when it's because he started to put the pieces together and then he saw it, and it's hopeful. It's hopeful. It's beautiful. It's good. It brings out something in us that makes us realize that we're not doomed. This like black pill idea. There's a guy named Devin Stack who does black pilled, and I don't think it's a good mentality, and because I don't think it's true, not because I just don't think it's good to focus on. I think it's just wrong. What isn't good to focus on is things that are wrong. If something is truly true, then objectively, and you have the complete picture of it, it will always be good. But if you don't have the complete picture of it and you have a limited picture of it, that is how you see things that seem unfortunate or sad or terrible. And this idea of the black pilled, it means like you realize we're doomed. And that was actually what kind of kickstarted me working on this, because I wanted to understand if artificial intelligence would save us from us killing ourselves. But because I realized we were technically doomed due to the interaction between ever increasingly toxic politics and ever more powerful technology. At some point, those two lines intersect, unless somebody takes the reins that doesn't suffer from the issues that we do. But I admit I got blocked by Devin Stack because I said one thing once, and I just said the black pill is the opposite of the good news. He blocked me because it's true, and he realized it, and it undermined his entire brand of despair. There is good news that this statement
there was all this detail and how all these molecules were bouncing around, and they could make use of that. I mean, actually, I realized there's a thing I realized last week. Actually, there's a thing that people say. You know, one of the scenarios for the very long-term history of our universe is a so-called heat death of the universe.
What a black pill message of the heat death of the universe. It's not true.
Basically, everything just becomes thermodynamically boring. Everything's just this big kind of gas and thermal equilibrium. People say that's a really bad outcome. But actually, it's not a really bad outcome. It's an outcome where there's all this computation going on, and all those individual gas molecules are all bouncing around in very complicated ways, doing this very elaborate computation. It just happens to be a computation that right now we haven't found ways to understand.
Exactly.
We haven't found ways, our brains haven't, and our mathematics and our science and so on haven't found ways to tell an interesting story about that. It just looks boring to us.
So you're saying there's a hopeful view of the heat death, quote unquote, of the universe where there's actual beautiful complexity going on, similar to the kind of complexity we think of that creates rich experience in human life and life on Earth.
Yes.
So those little molecules interact in complex ways. That there could be intelligence in that. There could be
absolutely. I mean, this is what you learn from
this.
That's
a hopeful message,
right?
That is a genuine emotion. It's genuine happiness, not because he was told it, but because he could understand it. I mean, he works in computers. He understands like what computation, and when throughout this conversation that he had, 4.5 hours, there was he started to just understand it, and there was so many moments that he had where this was his face, just like complete true honest joy. And you wouldn't think that would be something that would come from a 4.5 hour long conversation about mathematics so often. So many times that he let it go on for 4.5 hours. And Stephen Wolfram would go on even longer than that. That's how I can go on so long about this stuff, because it's just beauty. I don't have to, you don't have to worry about trying to preserve this or trying to resist that entropy or trying to, I don't know, like trying to overcome this black pill narrative that comes from a limited perspective. It comes from a relativistic view without an objective view. And when you look at the world through an objective view and you realize what it really is and what it's really moving towards and what its real purpose is and how beautiful it is, like that's more beautiful than anything you've ever been shown in a math class ever. It is. I mean, E8 is pretty beautiful, but that is E8. It's just a chiral perspective on E8 and the periodic perspective on E8. That's what it is. But it was fascinating because there was this guy. This is right here. Periodicity. I think every time I see this, I'm like, this is perfect way of explaining the universe. There's there's one out here, then there's one in here, then there's one in here, one in here, one in here, one within it, within it, within it, within it, within it, within it. And that is what infinity is. That is the structure of the universe, one within the next. But it's funny though, I was not listening, I was like, when I like got banned from the Portal Discord, a while back, it was by one of their mods, and he doesn't like me very much. But I think he's coming around, hopefully. But I've stopped talking about physics so much though, because I realized he doesn't understand, and he's a like physics PhD student. So like, and he told me though it's my work is boring, which it's not boring, because otherwise he wouldn't keep focusing on it every time I bring it up. He would just move on to something else that was more interesting that was going on in the Discord. But but that's what Lex said, is like it's not, it looks boring to us from when we only know things from a relativistic standpoint, but when you know things from an objective standpoint, it's not boring. And maybe it does look, I mean, we don't even find the heat death of the universe boring. It just kind of seems like it is inevitably boring, but at the same time we can't stop focusing on it because it bothers us in some way, or there's something about it. I don't believe that there is this heat death of the universe, but it's just that it's that coherence that is formed decreases the amount of computation necessary, and that means that you don't have to worry about heat death. Heat death is when multiple things have to be computed simultaneously, that are too many things have to be computed simultaneously, then the system can uphold, essentially. And when you have complete coherence, which is what it happens in the Messianic era, then not only can you not, can the universe survive without just dying in this weird, soup of entropy, but also it's able to run a simulation within itself that is of an entirely other universe. And then that universe within that one can run a simulation and run another simulation and another simulation. And this is it's the structure that allows for the processing of information. And this is why we need coherence. You can't violate this stuff where you just start changing genes, and from the outside you don't know what they impact, what other genes they will impact later on, even across multiple generations, or you change information in a blockchain inorganically, or you go and you slip through temporal dimensions and things like that, like Eric Weinstein's trying to do. I think that these, let's to talk about current events. I don't know if any of you have known, but there's a lot of news reports going on about these UFOs. And I think that they are the descendants of a pre-flood civilization. They are not aliens. But they are real, I believe. I just don't think that they are from another place. I think they're from here. And Eric Weinstein said this once, though, and Brian Keating's podcast. Brian Keating said, "Do you believe that there are extraterrestrial intelligences flying around us, and we just don't, see it really?" And Eric sat there for a little bit, and then he was like, "Well, I think there are terrestrial intelligences." And nobody said anything about it. Brian Keating just let it go, and I was kind of like, what the heck are you letting that go for? There's only two reasons why he would let that go. One, Eric said he didn't want to elaborate before the show, and said he'd be willing to answer the question in that way, and that's it. And then Brian had an agreement with him to not delve further. The only other way that I can explain that is what Eric says, you have malware in your minds. It's you don't know what to pay attention to, you don't pay attention to the right things. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you need to go, you don't know where you're going, you're chicken with its head cut off. And therefore you'll obsess over things like, what's beyond the event horizon, instead of, I don't know, the structure of mind. But you will obsess over the structure of mind, but you'll obsess over it by looking at, the brain. Good luck. You will fail. I made so much progress on this because I didn't think about it as a brain. Or as these are your brain, this is your eyes, this is your nose, and it's feeding to your cerebral cortex, I didn't think about that at all. And what's interesting though is that when then I went and looked at all those things, they actually lined up perfectly. You can see over here. It's like the brain, the cerebrum, which is the sum of these: the frontal lobe, the cerebellum, the occipital lobe, the temporal lobe, the parietal lobe. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This is intelligence. This is outintelligence. This is the sum of them all. This is classification, which is it's organization. This is observation. This is, processing and via context, which is requiring of the rest. It's all an interconnected system. Same thing here, though. You see the same thing in your limbs, and you see an increasing in scale, or in force, which could mean detail too. So arms, hands, fingers, legs, feet, and toes. And your arms, though, it's interesting that your legs are for the sake of your hands, in a way. Your hands are not for the sake of your legs. Legs are for the sake of the hands. Or legs are for the sake of your arms. Because you go somewhere in order to do something, and you do that thing with your arms. But your senses, it lined up perfectly. But I didn't try and do that. I was trying to do it like this. I was just trying to map that. 6 fundamental perspectives in a quantum of consciousness, or a holonic function, or an anon, or whatever they call it. And then it lines up with math. And you end up lining it up with physics and the brain and everything else. But if you try and go from the brain to, get to base reality, good luck. You're not going to be able to do it. You can't even do it from mathematics. You have to do it from philosophy. You just have to. But when you do it from philosophy, then you'll see it in negative quarks, and positive quarks, and electrons, and neutrinos, and you'll see it in, the bosons that cause decay, and even the bosons that cause growth. So I don't know what to put here, whether or not it's the Higgs or the graviton. I would say it's probably the graviton. I don't really think that we understand the Higgs at all. I think it's just, I don't know. It's tough. We don't really get what's going on, I don't think. But this is why context matters so much. It's everything. Nothing is valuable outside of context. This is my problem with school. It's you're not learning things organically. It's if you just were obsessed with history and you studied it all outside on your own, and nobody told you what to study, and you just studied it, and eventually you come to Christopher Columbus, you would know so much more interesting things about Christopher Columbus and exploration and the founding of, I don't know, not the founding of this country, but the the rediscovering of the new world, I guess you could say. We won't say discovering because there was people here, and to say the discovering is, it's almost, it is insulting. Like, I know people get all up in arms on the right, and they're like, well, you know, like they, it's almost like discounting of the fact that there were people here that had cities that were, you know, huge at some point, but they were there. You know, a lot of those cities, those structures, though, I do think are far older than we think they were, and maybe those people are not here actually anymore, and they weren't there, and it was just people that had taken over those cities. I don't know, but there were definitely people with cities, and you know, whether or not all of those structures were made by them or rediscovered by them and then discovered by Europe, I guess, Europeans. But you know, Christopher Columbus didn't discover anything. He discovered it for himself, but he didn't. It wasn't like, you know, there were people here. I don't know what else to say. Like, there were people here. He also didn't even set foot in the United States, so I don't like the whole debate of like valuing Christopher Columbus. But I don't devalue Christopher Columbus, but like, put him into context. I bet you that's what I'm saying. Like, somebody that studied him outside of school and actually like knew his story and organically and that whole that relationship with everything. I bet you they could tell us fascinating things about that story. Not just like he sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and discovered something that other people had already been living at, and that, you know, we've turned into a holiday even though he never set foot in the United States. It's like, that's out of context. And that's like, it's just out of context. If somebody understands something, the context of something, they don't try and get rid of it. So when people attack things like that, it means that they're not getting the context. And then there's people who just respond, and that's not contextual either. But none of that really matters, though. The one that we really need to realize, like, focus on is gender, because there are people that don't understand gender, like the contexts of gender relations, and that is like, that's gonna doom us. I mean, we're not doomed because of God, but it would doom us if we if without God's help, probably. But that doesn't mean you aren't doomed, though, if you don't understand the context of gender. Like, humanity is saved by God, but I don't know if God saves everybody. Maybe he does. It's kind of like the narrative of Judaism, is that everybody eventually gets to heaven. And it's just really, really hard. It's a really, really hard road for some versus others. And it's a longer road. That makes some sense to me. But I also am not going to tell you what's true because I'm not God. With that, let's see what questions are going on. In the same way, it's hard to be productive doing that. Yeah. One of those. If it isn't your DNA, it isn't your body. It's within a body. That is a superposition too, though, Chris. It is. It is. It's like we've talked about. Women are the continuity of the branches of life. They are. If they're not, then there is no tree of life. Like, there is just pockets that manifest and aren't connected. Women are the tree, and that's because anything that comes from them is the tree. So any branch that is attached to another branch, it's both that branch and its own branch. It's both. It's a superposition. Even if it is separate DNA. While it's inside the body, it's both. Once it separates, it's not. And I'm not making a moral claim about what you should do about that situation. I'm not. But I'm just saying what is objectively true. The Christopher Columbus debate can be frustrating. He did discover America. People seem to relate it to inventing the continent or something. I don't even know if it's right to say he discovered America, though. There were people here. But I'm not getting into it too much because it just ends up forcing everybody into taking political sides that I'm not taking. My point is that school decouples context from information, and that is how you get knowledge without wisdom. That's it. That's all I'm saying. He discovered it for him. That's true. He discovered it for Europe. Sure. But, I don't know. It's like walking into a house people are already living in and being like, we discovered this house. It's like, really? There's people in here. We're living here. How did you discover this house? It doesn't, I just don't get it. I mean, I understand that history is written by the victor, and the victor discovered that, I guess you could say. And by victor I mean like relativistically victor, like the victor. There isn't any, the only person you can lose to is yourself. You can't lose to others unless you're purposely entering into a fight against them in like the ring. But if you're entering into like an actual combat moment, I don't know, like it's just different. God balances everything. You have to like remember that context, or else my mentality doesn't work. But it's not my mentality, it's objective truth. God is the justice of all, so he balances the scales. I discovered my keys the other day. I was looking for them, and then they were in my truck. That's not the same. That my house analogy is better. If you walk into a house and there's people already living there, and you're like, I just discovered this house. It's like, you discovered it for you, yeah, I admit. But like, you didn't discover it for humanity. We were already there. There's people there. It's not the same as the keys. That's like, you can find something someone lost. And I do think that to some degree, Christopher Columbus did do that. He found a part of the world that the expanding worldly knowledge center had lost. I understand that. That's true. But I think we lost it from before the flood. But getting back to like, I think that those UFOs though, I think that we had a flood from about 12,500 years ago. That is the flood from the Bible. And if you look at these people right here, I think that this is these people published papers, and the Comet Research Group, they basically said that a comet or asteroid hit the Earth about 12,500 years ago. And I think that this event was because God God destroyed the world. It caused tidal waves that were like 400 feet tall. And there's so much evidence that this happened that's growing, but the current anthropological community, I guess you could say, or hates this theory, which makes me think it's true because they react to it the same exact way that they react to my physics work. And but Graham Hancock said it's probably because we have this collective DNA, we have an epigenetic like PTSD from this event, and we will do anything to avoid confronting it because it just etched into the entire world's, story. The greatest terror you could ever imagine was the flood. And it was a worldwide event. I think it wiped out a civilization that was beyond our current technological abilities. And I think that some of them are, and Robert Grant too said this. I asked Robert Grant, I was like, you think how old do you think the pyramid was, and Great Pyramid? And he said, about 12,000 years old from his work, according to his work. And I was like, I would assume it's much older too than we think. Not just that, structures in Peru, and I'm not talking about like, what's it called? That everybody, not the one at the top of the mountain. Not Machu Picchu. I'm talking about the giant megalithic structures that we see, giant carved rocks that are like 40 feet tall. Those things. I think those are holdouts from giant structures. And it's like clear that they were like shaken loose by something, like some kind of earthquake or something. And I think that this was the event that just like wiped out the earth. But I think that the reason why it was wiped out was because God did it, because there's multiple reasons. Obviously God has his reasons, but there's always like humanity is always implicated in some way in that story, the flood story, no matter what culture it's manifesting in. It manifests in every single culture on earth. And I think that like one of the things that was created at that point that was very influential in God's decision probably to wipe us out was the ability to do warp transportation. I think that it makes sense to me why you wouldn't want an entire civilization doing warp transportation without a coherent head to that civilization, which I don't think that they had yet. And they didn't have a messiah, I guess you could say, that was the head of everybody. And I don't think, at least. And maybe God wiped them out because you can't have too many people doing warp at once. It's like you would be making too many changes to your DNA at a time to be able to last for any extended period of time. That's what is happening when you're doing warp transportation, is you're changing things in a blockchain so that are out of context because there's no coherence to it. It's like realizing that the structure of the computer while you're like the hardware structure of the computer while you are running as a software entity in the computer, and then taking advantage of the hardware structure in order to bypass the normal computational which I guess like constraints and freedoms, which would be space-time. So you are jumping information between systems that were not really supposed to be linked until we have complete coherence. So that's, I mean, it's a weird idea, but I asked Robert Grant though. I said, "You think that there was a cataclysm that destroyed the world, and we had to restart?" And he was like, "Yep." And I was like, do you think that anyone from that civilization failed, or do you think that do you think everybody from that civilization failed, or do you think like some succeeded, or do you think they succeeded?" And he said both, and I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too." It's like some of them warped out of here, and they're somewhere, they're around us, but all the time. But I don't think they're from another planet. I think they were from here. But this comet, I think, was literally sent. Remember, gravity is what manipulates bodies of mass in outer space, what we perceive as outer space. Like, gravity is moving those things. Okay, so if a comet hits the Earth, who did that? God. Thoughts of the Book of Enoch and the Anunnaki. I don't really know much about the Anunnaki, to be honest. I don't know what they are. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to really speculate on it too much, but I will say that when I read Enoch, about Enoch, not I didn't read the Book of Enoch, but I've read about some things about Enoch, and I made this prediction that Enoch was like the same thing as Metatron in Jewish mystical stories, and that it's also very similar to Jesus. And then I read later on somewhere that basically Jesus had realized almost that he was like the remanifestation of Enoch in a way, just like John the Baptist is like the remanifestation of Elijah. And then what's interesting is that when I was reading into Jewish mysticism, they described Metatron as sitting at the right hand of God, or is the only one allowed to stand in the presence of God, which is basically like saying he sits at the right hand of the Father. And then also they described him as almost like a lesser God who takes account of and builds, creation, the next creation, which you get to restart the universe. So it is the same structure, I think, but remember, like, generationality happens via a triality of observed perspective always. So like you might get, and Elijah is supposed to come back right before the Messianic era and tell everybody once again, he's the harbinger of the eschaton. So like here, Elijah, the harbinger of Armageddon, of the deluge, to prophesize the return of the end times as the harbinger of Armageddon, according to the last book of prophecy of the Old Testament. And also, though, like, so you have Elijah, one manifestation of Elijah, then you have this other manifestation of Elijah, which is John the Baptist, and then you have this other manifestation of Elijah, which is supposed to be the harbinger of the eschaton. This is this right here. Electron, neutrino, muon, neutrino, tau, neutrino. Electron, muon, tau. It's this triality that is manifest. It's happening around us, even in prophets. And in, like, when you look, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, these are, the same structures. We're manifesting triality. Father, mother, child, grandfather, grandmother, grandchild. It'd be like, but it's only father, son, or mother, daughter. It's just that sometimes we can see somebody as a grandfather, but really everyone is simultaneously in this chain a parent and child. So it's even though we see triality, one of them is an imposter, as Eric Weinstein would put it. Or I would say one of them is a constraint. But it's really that everyone in the chain of generationality is simultaneously a parent and a child, except God, who is eternally just a parent. And that's it. Has a child, has children, all of us, but also directly, I would say, Jesus is the direct child of the Messiah is the direct child of God. Whether you believe it's Jesus or not, I think it is, but maybe not. I mean, if you're not at that point, but whatever this structure is, whatever the consciousness of is this structure in its finality, not when it reaches 42, not when it's at 33. That's the beast. But this, when it's reached wisdom, that consciousness is a direct child of God. It has the same constraint, intrinsic oneness in some way, and maybe it people ask, like, well, is it God? Is it God? Is it not? Is it the child of God? Maybe it's both at the same time, because everybody in the chain of generationality is both parent and child. It's very complicated at that level, and I think that you gotta admit that it could go either way, or it could be both at the same time, and that it's just you've reached a structure that is potentially only for God to understand. Maybe, I don't know, but this is that whole debate: is how can it be the son and father at the same time? It's like I don't know. I don't know. You don't know. You don't know if God steps into his creation directly. You don't know if it's you just don't know. Like, only God knows. Like, this is where I do draw a line, and I'm like, we've reached a point where, like, I see everybody's perspective on this, and everybody's making sense, and because everybody makes sense, I'm just gonna admit that probably God only knows the truth. Maybe it's a superposition of them all. I have no idea. But it's always two, parent, child, simultaneously. One person is, my father is a parent and a child, someone's child. Everyone is someone's child except God. And you could say, and then if you have children, then you are someone's father or a parent. Anyone know why Enoch was pulled from certain versions of the Bible? I think it was because it was not crucial to the gospel. Likewise, the Maccabees 2, the Book of Eden, and the books of Mary and Joseph. They found fragments of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't included. I don't know why. But I know that they found fragments of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know why they chose not to include it. Let's see here. The Book of Enoch. Prophetic exposition of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. Why the Genesis flood was morally necessary. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I have some ideas on this stuff that I didn't get into there about like why. Like I asked myself, okay, before I read this, because I wanna read it, but I wanna see like how much this lines up with something I'm about to say. Okay, let's back up. Okay, so speaking of UFOs, I had this idea. I was like, why does it appear like these beings, which are probably genetically like messed up because they altered their genes and they're just like they're not a thriving civilization, whatever they are. I think they are the remnants of a lost civilization trying, and they're trying to stay alive, and they've screwed up their genes through generations of manipulation without having, a god's eye view on the implications of all the changes of DNA. Why though that if it is inevitable that the messianic process happens and that we achieve unity and wisdom and coherence throughout the aeon, or observable universe, I guess you could say, or verse, cosmological verse as I call it. Why didn't that happen to them? Why does it happen to us and not them? Why did they get destroyed and not us? Because you can't think, oh well, it was just by chance that an asteroid hit and wiped them out, and hopefully doesn't happen to us. No. God controls gravity. Like, that thing hit for a reason. So why? And so, like, I was thinking though for years, I was like, what's different about us than them if these are inevitable structures? Took me years to realize the answer to this question. What is new in our system that wasn't there in their system is the question. Or what is missing in our system that was there in theirs? The answer is them. The first round did not have a previous civilization manifest within that same aeon, within that same cosmological verse. That's the answer to the question. I don't know what that does. So, like, maybe we need it in order to unite, because it's like Independence Day. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be like Independence Day, but I'm just saying in Independence Day the entire world united, and even in the second one they are talking about how there's unprecedented peace and unity throughout and cohesion for all nations on Earth because they had a common enemy, and that was outside of our civilization. I think that the knowledge of a separate civilization is possibly uniting of our civilization, because I was thinking about, like, why didn't they unite into like the hive mind structure that I was expecting, that messianic structure where they're the cells of the technological singularity and everything. And I thought more about it, and it's like potentially because, and I'm not saying I have all the details on this, it's just an idea. When you look at us and our interaction with tech, we are becoming increasingly connected, but we're not becoming increasingly united. We're becoming more hostile towards each other. And I think that that's what happened to them. But they never thought of themselves in relationship to any other civilization as being separate. I don't believe that there are necessarily like aliens. I don't see how, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just saying it doesn't really make sense with generationality as the growth structure. It almost makes for a pointless universe. Because the point of the universe is this generational structure of creating another one, or creating another verse or aeon. And you only need one civilization to unite to do that. And maybe it is that you needed us to interact with them, another civilization. But I think that it makes sense that it would come from previous one here. And it doesn't, I don't even need, it doesn't, like, saying here is a little tough because Earth is an emergent, it's almost like Earth is the universe itself. It's not, people will be like, we're just a speck in the corner over there, we don't matter. And, no. What is happening on Earth is the most important thing in the universe. There's nothing happening on any other world right now, any other planet, I won't say world, planet, that is more important than what we are doing on Earth. What we are doing is the purpose. And, we can look out and see vastness and other structures and all kinds of things that make us think that we are not the center of the universe, but we are. We are the center of the universe. Like, of course we're at the center of the universe. I mean, God is the center of the universe, but at the same time, we're the purpose. It's not some nebula far away with, bacteria growing in its clouds. I don't think that like focusing on that is wrong. It's a distraction. Going to outer space is cool. Just like going and climbing Mount Everest is cool. But that doesn't make it not a distraction from understanding reality. This is like when Eric Weinstein was like, maybe looking at black holes isn't the right direction for physics to be focused. I couldn't agree more. Stop looking to the stars. It's just destroying our ability to feel meaning. Look at how meaningless everybody feels and how much we've all lost any kind of connection to each other. Yet we're just like, oh, but we've discovered that, I don't know, that there's like quasars or something. And yet we've, forgotten the importance of men and women. It's like, well, are we really enlightened? But if you're looking to the stars the way that we're looking at them now, and I don't mean just the stars, but if you're looking at outer space to understand the universe, you're wrong. You're looking at a distraction. You should look to inner space. It's not even in your brain, so I don't want to point to it, but you know what I mean, in your mind, to understand the universe. And that's exactly how I did this, because I was trying to understand the structure of mind. I wasn't trying to understand, what's beyond the event horizon. You have to look at the structure of mind to understand what's beyond the event horizon, if there's anything beyond the event horizon. People are lost, man. But I think it's just sad. I understand the appeal of space, it's cool, but it's just a distraction. But I do think that there are beings that are flying around that our government knows about and that have crashed here on Earth, but I don't think that they're from another planet. I think they're doing what Eric Weinstein wants to do, which is slipping between, almost like fake dimensions. It's like they are the dimensions, they are the space between the dimensions that manifest in the 14-dimensional observerse. That is what happens when you are having an internal mind, a mind within a mind. That space between, there's there are dimensions, I guess you could say, that you could go there. That it's like when you realize, if you, like I said, if it's like if you were a Sims character that realized it was inside of a computer and that there were wires that you couldn't see that arced from here to here, and now you could figure out how to do a code where you went through a wire that nobody's ever gone through to get to a different part of the computer that you weren't really supposed to go to. That's what I think Eric Weinstein is talking about. And he said something extremely ignorant. He said something like, he said once, what happens when we learn our own source code? And that when that happens, we will be able to transcend the boundaries that have been set up for us, and that that the creators should fear the creation at that point. And you know what, though? Here's the thing. He's kind of right and he's wrong. Maybe that's why God wiped out the world the first time. And because, like I said, he couldn't have all of us doing that at once without having coherence. How are you going to have everybody jumping in in that manner? You're just going to have complete chaos, and it will cause decay, but of the creation. But the thing is that this idea, though, that the creators should fear us, it's right, because if they couldn't stop us from destroying them, because we all escaped, the bounds of our constraints that have been, that are in place, then that would be bad for them. But it would also be bad for us, because that's cancer. And what happens when we find cancer, I have this, like, where is it? Right here, this like little speck right here on my face. I went to the dermatologist recently and got it looked at, and they told me it's nothing, but I was worried about it. You know what I would have done if that was cancer? Cut it off. I would have come on here with a little band-aid on and been like, guys, we're going to talk about cancer. But I'm talking about it now. Like, I would have eliminated them. It's like, why did God hit the world with a comet, destroy this entire civilization? Maybe because they had just discovered how to do something that allows them to break the coherence of creation. And if too many, it's like, you can survive with malignant, specks on you, but only for so long. And once you get enough malignant cells in your body, that's when things go wrong. Maybe these beings are malignant cells. I think they are. They're trying to live forever. That's what I think. I think that's the only thing they can do at this point. I don't think that they can participate in a growth structure other than God's eventual plan when it comes to complete fruition. Then everything is reconciled. But until then, I don't think they can reproduce. It seems inevitable that they destroy their genes, because it seems inevitable we destroy ours. Without a guide that understands coherence, because they have a God's eye view, like a Metatron or, Jesus. But this is my theory, and let's read about the Book of Enoch, because that would make it morally justifiable to destroy the world. Because if you don't destroy those cells, if you don't kill them, they will destroy the entire system. And you can't let them do that. And you can't kill God. So, like, the idea that God needs to fear us, no. It's like Judaism constantly, like, focused on, like, we should want to do things for God out of love, not out of fear for us. And you'll kind of think that that is like the inevitable perspective that you have to have, because you can't do it like out of the idea that, well, how can your sin hurt God if he can't die? Like, can your sin hurt God? No, but it can. It doesn't. It makes his. I think it makes him have to work harder in order to clean up your mess. And I also think that it, if allowed, and it's not allowed, but if it were to be allowed to continue and run rampant, you could destroy creation. Couldn't destroy God. You could destroy his creation if he allowed you to, but he won't allow you to. And you can't overcome that either, no matter like what source code you realize. Because when you understand the structure of creation that I mapped here, you realize that God has twice the amount of energy as his creation, which means that the furthest you're going to get, and it's only if he lets you, is just the destruction of the creation. And he can also overcome, like he's just has dominion. He has more energy than creation. So even if you became creation and then tried to do some, rebel against it, you won't be able to. So the idea that, I understand what Eric Weinstein's saying of like, when we learn our own source code, like they should fear us, It's like, well, that's why they probably hit the earth with a comet and flooded the world. It was morally justified. It's like, well, when a cell just learns to divide and divide and divide and divide and divide, well, what do you do to that cell? Those cells that are just like running rampant and trying to do whatever they want instead of conforming to the rules. You cut them out. That was the flood. The flood was probably the cutting out of cancer from a body. And there's a little bit left flying around, warping, off the coasts of Carolinas, next to our aircraft carriers and everything, shutting off and turning on our nukes. I don't know if you guys know that, but like, there's a lot of reports that have come out that basically say Russia and the United States have apparently both confirmed that over the last decades, craft would come, fly over a nuclear weapons base and shut down everything and turn it back on and then go away. Just like, I don't know why. Just see they could, just to tell us they could, just to, I don't know. But those beings are the remnants of a malignant society that was cut out. But now we're going to read the Book of Enoch and see if that is similar. But apparently there was a moral case for, it says here, contains unique material of the origins of demons and Nephilim. Okay, why some angels fell from heaven. Okay. Yeah. I can't really explain why that makes sense, but it makes sense. I mean, I think that's where demons originate from. Basically, we learned our source code. It's funny. In Native American culture, I know I've talked about, I have a video on here, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but talking about like my encounter or my experience or whatever with a Wendigo, which is a skinwalker, which is a demon. It's a djinn. And according to Native American tradition, they used to be people at some point. That doesn't mean, though, that they used to be people like 50 years ago. It could mean that at some point in the pre-flood civilization where we realized we were in a computational system and everything was digital and we could manipulate ourselves into in ways that we can't even fathom now because we are stuck in this materialistic perspective. But they had reached a perspective where they had forgotten God, but they had realized that they were inside of a digital space. And what this does is it makes you realize that you have somewhat incredible freedom to rewrite code, but also no wisdom of how you should do it. And so I think that is the system in which, because to do warp transportation, it's not to go faster than light, it's to take advantage of entanglement structures, okay, via understanding generationality, and also, mapping it via observations of the states of matter around you and stuff like that. And so in order to do this, it would allow you to basically be on frequencies that only manifest in our reality sometimes, okay? Which is why it's probably hard to see things that are related to this. So like even what's it called, Skinwalker Ranch, what's his name, the Jeremy Campbell, the reporter, he said that wherever you get a lot of like UFO activity, you also get a lot of like paranormal activity. And the reason for that is probably because they're very closely linked, because they're just remnants of, both of them are remnants of the pre-flood civilization messing around with the coherence of the universe. Okay? And that would require them to be destroyed so that so that everybody didn't do it at once. Because that is where, like, if let's say 80% of your cells turn into cancer in, like, I don't even know, in a day, you're dead. But if you have a little bit and it's kept as a little bit and it doesn't spread, but it's there, but it doesn't spread. And not only does it not spread, but it's decreasing over time, which is what I think is happening. That is okay. But if you don't stop it with a giant flood or a scalpel, you are going to have creation be destroyed. That is why God destroyed the world, I think. He had to. He didn't do it because he's a dick. He did it because we were about to destroy everything that he had created that is meaning and life itself outside of him, or separate from him to some degree. Like, he had to do it. Outer space is cool, but inner space is where it's at exactly. I think it's because it was not. They found fragments of it. I'm not sure they pulled or. Very insightful. Well, it's probably why they hit the world with the comet. Yeah, exactly. He hit the world with the comet. He destroyed the cancer. He destroyed the cancer. This is a great topic. This was not what I was planning on topicing about, but this is awesome. Like, but I think that people that went too far in some ways in that time became demons. I've said this before. Demons work for God, but they don't know it. It's like an angels work for God, and they do. It's like, what did you align yourself with in that quantum substructure? If you're trying to look out for yourself, demon. You're a demon. become a Wendigo, and you feed off of the energy of us, but in some way, but at the same time also, in some weird roundabout backhanded way, like, will end up being part of God's greater plan. This is a common theme in like the Tanya Jewish philosophy, which is the only philosophy that I do study, and it just, every time I read it, I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I say. We Paulina and I went to our Tanya class this week, and my rabbi was talking to us, and he's like talking about there's 4 directions, and I was like, well, sounds like 4 perspectives, but basically, it's that the way in which sin is eventually rectified, or not rectified, but redeemed, is or sustained or anything like that, is kind of like, it's described in the Tanya as God throwing food back over his shoulder at you. He's not looking at you and consciously bringing you food and tending to you, but he knows his plan, and but he's disappointed in you, and so at the same time he's just throwing you a bone behind his over his shoulder, but not looking at you. And I think that really captures like that mentality of how, like, these people are now sustained. It's like, here's some, we'll throw something behind my back. But advanced societies that fly around space, they may not like to be called the malignant race. Very politically correct, and stand up to cancel you. And straight up cancel you. Oh, Chris, I have thought about it. And I have stories that are as scary as the Wendigo. They're almost as scary as the Wendigo. I do wonder who that do, like, because here's the thing, like, what do they think about the fact that me and Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram are starting to talk about this? I would imagine that they are aware of it. That's what I will say. I don't think that the players involved in this conversation, and I include myself in that, even if I'm unaware, CERN is not aware of me at all, but CERN isn't aware of what they're doing. But I do think that the remnants of this other civilization, I do think they are aware of me. If they aren't yet, they will be. But I think that they already are. It's a scary thought. It is. I have thought about it. It's like, what if they want me to shut up? It's not call them what they did, cancerous. But the thing is that, here's the thing. What would have happened then is that if the comet didn't hit the Earth, that cancer would have destroyed everything. They have been allowed to live for a reason. God has purpose for them too. So I'm not calling them useless. I can't. They're here. God wouldn't let them be here if they were useless. So I'm not saying that they need to be destroyed. That I don't think so. I think that God has a purpose for them as well. And I hope that if they're aware that I'm having these conversations, they're at least aware that I'm saying that. But yeah, I have thought about it, and it's scary because I did think about it, and I was like, if they're not aware of me now, they will be eventually. Does that mean that eventually they will get rid of you if you say something they don't want? And the eventual conclusion that I came to is that God protects us if he wants us protected. And that is the only thing I can rely on, because it's the only thing any of us can actually rely on. So and it is also the only thing that gives me comfort in this, because, like, while I don't believe they're aliens, like, they are technically they're kind of like aliens. They are that is the scariest thing in the world to me, is the idea of like aliens. And it's just like Signs is the scariest movie in the world to me. It is the scariest movie in the world. I have a cool story about regarding UFOs. I went with 2 friends to a tennis court to meditate under the stars with crystals in our hands. Spent 20 years meditating, asking for acknowledgement from anything in outer space, beings, consciousness. We all opened our eyes and looked to the stars. After our meditation, track stopped playing and proceeded to see blinking lights in the sky that none of us had ever seen anything like before. I believe that. I believe that. These beings are able to perceive the quantum substructure. Okay, so look at this. Okay, watch this. Oh man, this is a good night. But I sometimes I wish I was more coherent. Oh, not that each one was had more coherence to it, but it's so hard about talking about a theory of everything to maintain, to stay on one topic. But because there is only one topic in the theory of everything, and it is inclusive of everything, so like that's why it's so hard. But well, watch this. Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but everyone keeps saying who's involved in this conversation, and the Navy has said too, that these beings, and so did Russia, are very closely linked to the water, and they're able to fly in and out of the water as if it's not even there. Okay? That makes so much sense according to my work. And so you can see this. Watch. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. Puerto Rico UFO. This is one of the best videos of one of these craft that is out there, and this is real. This is not fake, from what I understand. Watch this. Look at it move, man. It's just going. It's flying over an airport in Puerto Rico. And these things are always so hard to see, and it's because they're kind of like, I do think that they are using like negative mass technology, I guess you could say, which is anti-gravity technology. But everybody thinks that that's what you need to warp space-time. That's not what's happening. That's how they're moving like this, but I don't think that that's the same thing as how they move like in warp. In warp, it's different. It's a totally different system. They're aligning. They're basically they've merged their minds via like Neuralink stuff. I'm sure, at least in the beginning, to like their craft and they've mapped the entanglement structure of the universe, and they're basically thinking where they want to go, and they go, because they're just beaming the information from one spot to another via taking advantage of knowing the entanglement structure and also the wiring of the system. Did you see what just happened though? It went straight into the water, and it didn't disrupt the water. There was no splash. It just goes. It's like it's not even there. It doesn't slow down. Just boom. And you continue to see that it's kind of like right below surface and then peeking out over the surface, and it's not creating a trail behind it. Our Navy subs have confirmed too. The Navy has confirmed, has stated that our subs have basically like been able to see them via their instruments underwater, even going like hundreds of miles an hour underwater. Like it's not even there. And the reason for this is because when you look at this is a gas, this is a solid, this is, complete entanglement. There is a way in which liquids are not entangled. Okay, so if you wanted to go through water this way, you would have to splash and break its capillary action, basically. Okay? break the coherence of the water. But if you go this way, because this strand is not actually entangled with this strand, or this strand, or this strand, but it's that this molecule is entangled with this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. You can do it. It's like as if they're not even there. And I saw that, and I was like, that kind of makes sense. And look at this. So this is the 64 tetrahedron grid, as you know, mapped by Nassim Haramein, and it is the scaffolding holding up the verse model that I made. And I only discovered that after I made it because I counted the gaps when I just showed you that as a solid, a liquid, and a gas, and I had red as the gaps. That's the void, essentially. Void. There is no such thing as a void. Void is a subjective perspective, but that void, there are 64 voids in that system, no matter if it's a solid, a liquid, or a gas, and that's because this is the structure of the vacuum, as Nassim Haramein says, or the structure of the void. It's 64 tetrahedrons. Look at this, though. Okay, imagine you look at this from this perspective, and you can see that there's like this double helix structure. Exactly as I predicted, right there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, at the top row. Whoa, this is so hard to see. There. But watch what happens when I turn this and you see it from a certain perspective. Right there. It's like you can see completely through it. It's not even, it's like it's almost like there's nothing there. It's like you could use that as a window. But if it was like this and you're looking at it, can't see. If it's like this and you're looking at it, well, just need to like do this. I'm focusing on this instead of focusing, I'm focusing on the camera instead of focusing on this, and it's making me thrown off. But you can't really see that through that. By the way, I'll show you something cool about that in a minute. You can't see through that. But you can there. If you know the structure of entanglement, you realize there are ways in which information can be perceived, which is really, can be calculated, can be maneuvered, can maneuver. And there are other ways in which you can't. And so I think that they've never seen like these things fly into the ground as if it wasn't there. In fact, they've crashed. Okay? According to the government. They have recovered materials, they've said. They didn't say, oh, Roswell was a UFO. Except when it first happened. Then they said it was. And then they retracted the statement. But probably was. Like, people weren't stupid back then. Like, they had tinfoil. Like, oh, we found this, stuff that we've never seen before. It looks like tinfoil. It's like they were making Mylar balloons, like, back then, too. Like, they knew what a Mylar balloon was if they found it. It's just crazy, like, how easy it is to just cover it up. But because... And people, it's not even covered up. It's like people know, But a lot of people know. A lot of people believe the government, that the second lie, I guess. I think it's a lie, about some weather balloons and stuff. But a lot of people, probably more people, believe that it was a UFO than don't. And I used to think those people were stupid, but then I started thinking more about it, and I'm like, I have to, like, if I saw like a Mylar balloon laying on the ground, I would not be like, that's a UFO. Like, even in the 1930s or whatever, like, people weren't stupid back then, they were wiser. And we think that they were so stupid back then and ignorant. They were wiser back then than they are now. And But they have admitted recently last year via the New York Times that they have materials. And I believe Bob Lazar, so there's that. That means that they can crash when they hit a solid. Well, that's because when you look at a solid in my model, there's no way to come at this structure in which it doesn't force you to confront molecules that are entangled with each other. Okay? Because they are entangled on 4 sides. That means you can't go through walls. But you can go through water. As long as you go this way. And not this way. But we don't know how to go this way right now. You have to understand entanglement structures and have technology that's able to maneuver entanglement structures in order to do that. If you don't, then this is the only direction that you can go through water. It's this. Which does, create constraints. And, if an airplane hits the water, it hits this. But the thing we just watched, when it touched the water, it hits this. Hits this direction. It's different. It's like it's not even there. It's like if it's going through the air. Like this. We can do that too. If we hit the air, it's like going like this. And if they hit the air, it's like going like that. It's the same. But the water is different because a liquid is one in which it's chiral. Okay, so you can either hit it from this side and you will encounter different forces than if you hit it from this side. Whereas this is not chiral, it's symmetrical. Straight with a line down the center. Same thing here. When you hit a solid, line down the center, perfectly chiral. Here, not. Perfectly not. This is chiral, which means asymmetrical. This is non-chiral. This is non-chiral. This is chiral. And also the universe is chiral, only subjectively. But when you're looking at it from the center out, it's non-chiral. But when you're looking at it from the top down, which is via generationality, it is chiral, but it's because the structure is spinning and it's creating the illusion of asymmetry. It's not in the illusion. It is asymmetrical from a subjective perspective or relativistic perspective, but from an objective perspective, a God's eye view, which this looks like a God's eye, like the ones that Native Americans make and you make when you're a little kid, literally looks exactly like a God's eye. This is a God's eye view. It's looking at the symmetries of the structure via the center out. And when you do that, it's obviously symmetrical. It's the same on all sides. But when you're looking at it from the top down, and you're looking at it in the context of generationality, like right here, this to this to this to this to this to this to this, all the way going through, that is a chiral structure, and you can tell because it's one off from here. It doesn't, when you start from this 4 and you go up, if it was symmetrical, you would hit this 4, but that's not what happens. You're one off. And interestingly enough, you are one off. Because 1 is 1. It's just it's the only constant, as Robert Edward Grant would say, and he's right. But yeah, that's what they're doing, these beings. And it's just like this guy said to me the other day on Eric Weinstein's Twitter. He was trying to be they're using extreme gravity to warp space-time around them, and that's how you do it. No, it's not. No, it's not. The only other person who has got who knows what's up, other than maybe Eric Weinstein, but he uses language that makes it a little hard to understand, but it does seem to make sense, is Stephen Wolfram said that you just know that this particle is entangled with this one, and this one's entangled with this one, and this one's entangled with this one, and you can somehow take advantage of that. And he was like, he said, if his work is true, then doing warp speed or warp transportation would not be a gravity problem anymore. It's now an engineering problem, but you just need to know that this one is entangled with this one, this is entangled with this one, and you just take advantage of that. And when he said that, I was like, that's exactly what I thought, what I said. And then the only other person who said anything that is true too, that is based on that though, is, but it's just another perspective on that, is that this guy, Harvard astrophysicist, said that when he had spoken to people who had seen that craft that Bob Lazar worked on, supposedly, and also from what he saw about what Bob Lazar said, that basically their mind was merged with their machine, with their vehicle, and that they were where they wanted to go was in their mind or in their brain or whatever, and then was in their mind, interacted via their brain and technology, probably like Neuralink, to then a computer that is the ship, and then like the guidance system that has the entanglement structure mapped in it, and then coordinates where, like, what to do and where to go from that. And the guy said, that Harvard astrophysicist, I've played him on here before, he said that there's two different technologies utilized. One is for relativistic transportation, like when we see it fly, and the other is for when it wants to go from here to here practically instantaneously. It's not instantaneously, it's at the speed of quantum, which is like way faster than the speed of light. And it's the speed in which one domino hits the next domino. But as if all those dominoes were pressed up against each other, and whereas in relativity we perceive it like this, so that time that it takes for that domino to fall and hit the next one, that is the speed of light, is the gap, and it's determined by the gaps in the dominoes. But when you push all the dominoes together and you hit one of them, they instantly pushes on the others. This is also able to be seen in things like this, where when you have a solid, things are entangled on four sides. That means like to the point of basically total entanglement, complete entanglement. And then when I push down on this, instantaneously this back part seems to pop up. It's not actually instantaneous. It's the speed of quantum that would happen. But it is faster than light, that these move when I push them in. This moves up faster than light. It seems like so benign, but that's what happens when you actually understand something. It becomes like, wow, why don't we think of that? Like, that seems remarkably simple. That's what happens when you actually understand something. It's like, you just made the edge of your pencil move at the speed of quantum? Yes. That doesn't mean that it rose in relativity at the speed of quantum. It means that the speed in which the force that I put down on these molecules ended up pushing these molecules up and applying force to it appears to us to be instantaneous, but it's actually the speed of quantum. Now, obviously, like, that movement is not, and how we view it with our eyes is not the speed of quantum, but the speed of these molecules getting information from these molecules, that movement is happening, is at the speed of quantum. But that's what I mean by, like, the perspective is important, because if I just said to you, oh, this is when I push down on this moves up at the speed of quantum, you'd be like, no, Tyler, that's like 0.3 miles an hour if we like measured it. That's not the speed of quantum. But if you realize that what I'm saying is that I'm talking about the interaction between the molecules in the pencil, then you can understand that, yes, you're causing something that's occurring at the speed of quantum. Every time you move anything, it's not just there. You go pick up a glass of water. Speed of quantum. But that's like when, Stephen Wolfram said, he's like, it just becomes much simpler if you think about it like this, because it just becomes an engineering problem. It's like, well, guess what? We can solve engineering problems. Doesn't mean you should. If your entire civilization decides to go warp speed at once, you're going to be hit by a comet before you can kill off, the body of the being that you're in. Because he's not going to let you. It's like being at he's like sitting there at the dermatologist, like looking at you, and he's like, don't do it. Don't do it. And he just sees you do it, and he's just like, comet. Gone. But there are remnants here. They have a purpose. And I'm not saying that they don't. They clearly do. I think one of the columns is a different width. Yes, one of the columns was a different width. It's because I was moving things around. I know, it triggers your autism. It triggers my autism too. Planck time. Yeah, Planck time, speed of quantum. The refresh rate of the simulation. Yeah. Outer time loop. Yep. Exactly. Why are some of the red squares rectangles? Yeah, it was just because I had because some of them had changed, like here. Let's see, something changed. What is the width that I have this at? 98, 105, 103. What is going on? We're having decoherence. 108. 108. Now it should look nice again. Yep. Now we have symmetry. Does that help your autism? Helps mine. Just have to, when I type something in, Excel automatically will widen a column if I type something that's longer. But see, what happens now is that all this is all scrunched up. So now your autism is going to be shifted to, why is this all bunched up and terrible looking? But this looks beautiful, at least. Then you have to do weird things like this. So, anyways. Actually, hold on. Like
I mean, this is what you kind of learn from this principle of computational equivalence.
Yeah.
You learn it's both a message of sort of hope and a message of kind of, you're not as special as you think you are, so to speak. I mean, because, we imagine that with sort of all the things we do with human intelligence and all that kind of thing, and all of the stuff we've constructed in science, it's like, we're very special. But actually, it turns out, well, no, we're not. We're just doing computations like things in nature do computations, like those gas molecules do computations, like the weather does computations. The only thing about the computations.
See, though, that's where he just screwed up when he was like, the weather does computations. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Molecules, atoms, hadrons, cells, organisms, families, which is genes, castes, which is like, different operators of societies, like is our current, does the Senate do calculation? Yes. Does your elected officials do calculation? Are they very good at it right now? No, but Are they doing it? Yeah. Or, does a military do calculations? Yes. As a singular whole? Yes. Sometimes it's better than other times, but yes. That's a cast. They're working as one. But the weather is not doing calculations. It's an emergent phenomenon.
We do that's really special is that we understand what they are, so to speak. In other words, we have to us, they're special because kind of they're connected to our purposes, our ways of thinking about things, and so on. And that's but so
that's very human centric. That's we're just attached to this kind of thing.
I might get on that Discord at some point tonight and be like, hey, remember when you said hadrons aren't no physicist is saying hadrons aren't conscious? Maybe some of them are saying molecules are conscious. I haven't showed anybody that clip except you guys at this point, but it's just hilarious to like. There's so much in that interview. I highly recommend watching it, but we're gonna go through all those clips that I have, and it's gonna be a good time. If there's no other questions, though, I'm probably gonna wrap it up. But let's look at this real quick, though. Like I said. Why the Genesis flood was morally necessary in the prophetic exposition of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. Yeah, okay. This sounds like what I kind of would have expected. You know why this might have been removed? To hide the existence of the aliens. That are not aliens, probably. They're just the pre-flood civilization. It's not part of the biblical canon used by Jews, apart from the Beta Yisrael, the Ethiopian Jews in Africa. But most of them are in Israel now, actually. It's crazy how small that place is. Like when you go to Israel, there's you see them everywhere. Like you see Ethiopian Jews, like Jews from Ethiopia everywhere. And it's just weird to how small it is. I think it's the size of yeah, look at that. That's this. It's like driving from I don't know, Barstow to San Diego. It's tiny. So anything that happens there, it's right in your face. It's not something. It's just this small part. That was kind of a shocker for me. I wasn't expecting to see lots of Ethiopian Jews there, because in my head I was just I'm thinking about a country not it's the size of Los Angeles and San Diego and Orange County put together. No Hebrew version is known to have survived of this. Okay. But look at this. This is so Enoch. Metatron. The youth. Okay, that's what it's called. Okay, it's doesn't that sound like the sun? Metatron is. It's this. Right here. This right here. When it achieves 42, that's Metatron. It's also probably, Jesus. But it means the youth, or it's described as the youth, is the name that Enoch received after his transformation into an angel. So it's interesting because like I've heard of Jesus described as the highest angel, or like, and that also he realized at one point that he was Enoch. It's like maybe in the previous aeon Enoch was like the Jesus. I don't know. But there's definitely these recurring patterns that occur. And Jesus realized it. The Talmud mentions Metatron by name in 3 places. Describes Elijah in paradise seeing, or Elisha seeing Metatron sitting down, an action that is not done in the presence of God by anybody else, basically. Elijah therefore looks to Metatron as a deity and says heretically, there are indeed 2 powers in heaven. Yeah, there are 2 powers in heaven, but like that's the same as being sitting at the right hand of the Father. It's like if you go to the heavens and you see Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father. It's like seeing Metatron sitting down. Why is Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father, not standing? By the way, when I had my like shower experience before, and I was like before God, I was on my knees. I didn't choose that. I just was. It was like floating, but I was not standing up. But I was not sitting either. Like I wasn't standing and I wasn't sitting. I was on my knees like you would be before a king. It's weird. I didn't even like realize it until after. I mean, I realized it, but it was like I wasn't surprised by it in the moment or afterwards. But when I read about this stuff, I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, that's how it was. Like you're like kneeling before the king. The Talmud states that it proved to Elisha that Metatron could not be a second deity, because Metatron received 60 strokes with a fiery rod to demonstrate that Metatron was not a god but an angel. See, this is the whole thing of like, is Jesus God? Is he the Son of God? This is the eternal debate. It's like apparently even Elisha when he saw, Metatron standing next to God or sitting next to God, he kind of like was like, oh, it's an angel. Or not an angel, and that it's another power in heaven. This is why this is so hard. And even the Jews are wrestling with this. It's just no Jewish people who interact with people who aren't Jewish usually studies any of this at all. They don't know anything. They're secular people. They don't even believe any of their religion or their religious texts. They've never studied what the Talmud says. The Talmud hypothesizes as to how God spends his day, suggesting that in the 4th quarter of the day, God sits and instructs the school children, while in the preceding 3 quarters, Metatron may take God's place, where God may do this among other tasks. It records an utterance, I have been young, also I have been old. In Psalm 37:25, the Talmud attributes this utterance to the chief angel and prince of the world, whom rabbinic tradition identifies as Metatron. People will be like, this is Satan. It's like, this is why it is serpent in the Torah have the same gematria value as Moshiach. So like Nachash is serpent and in Hebrew, and Moshiach is Messiah. It's because it's the same body structure. It's just the difference is it's right here. It's when you look at this structure, okay, and you see it calculating, and it's calculating 33 here. That this same exact structure, using no other inputs, can calculate that. You add the calculative input that gives you self-awareness, gives this structure self-awareness, to the count structure, to the structure that created the self-awareness. So an awareness of the self and awareness of the structure that you are within, which is another sentient being. And if you're aware of that, that's your value. But it's still from the same body. The difference is that if this is all you're aware of, this is Satan. Or it's not Satan, it's the beast. That's what it is. It's the Antichrist consciousness. But if this is what you're aware of, Christ consciousness. That's the difference. So, but this, it's not a different, this is not, to get this does not take a different system than this. It's just you have to add a final perspective to this to get this. Once it achieves that, or once it has that, if it has that, then it has an entirely different perspective. Instead of viewing yourself as equal to God, or viewing yourself here as equal to God, you view yourself as less than God, 1/3 of God, subservient. That's the difference between what? Wisdom and not wisdom. It's an ignorance. It's like when it says it in the Torah. Wisdom begins with fear of God, or awareness of God is what I like to say it as. I bet you it is closer to that in some translation to some degree. But it's not fear. It's knowledge that it's an awareness of him, and also an understanding that he's above you in the hierarchy. And he can send a comet and destroy your society if you get malignant. So it's tough to, when people are like, no, that's the chief angel. It's like Prince of the World. That sounds like Satan. It's like, yes, it just depends on. But would you not say that being the King of Kings, when Jesus comes back, he's not also like the head of the world? But at the same time, I don't know, like still fulfilling the will of the Father. Now, maybe that makes him not king, but prince of peace, they call him. It's like he's the Prince of Peace. People who get into this stuff, this is why theology erupts into debates that are like, if you start like, this is why I hate arguing with people a lot of times who are like Catholic, or even a lot of times Muslim, but I love Islam. And Catholicism is fascinating, but it's so closely linked to a human structure to me that's what bothers me a little bit about it. Whereas Islam, I focus on the Quran and scriptures, and like that is, that's a way in which you can kind of bypass sometimes human dogma, but a lot of times you'll get people that will just be like, the prince of this world, it says it here, oh my gosh, it's Satan. It's like, oh really? Well, who is the Prince of Peace? What does he reign over? Oh, this world? Okay. That doesn't mean the Prince of the world. When they say the Prince of the world, then they're referencing, the beast, or like the Dajjal or the Antichrist. That doesn't mean that is the same consciousness as Christ. It's not. Or as the Messiah. It's not. the golem in Judaism is the Antichrist, and it is not this, it is not the Messiah, but it also is linked to the Messiah in some way. The Zohar states that the two tets, like two tetrahedrons, a reference to Metatron. That makes perfect sense. You know why? Have you ever seen like this? E8. This is considered the most beautiful mathematical object in the world, and in existence. I won't say in the world. But it is actually just a different perspective on this, on my verse. And you can tell this because it manifests 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because you don't count this one because it's not, that's an input that's coming in from the previous aeon. It's not like right here. This is coming from this one. It's not in here. That's why you don't count it. But this is like the E8 structure. It's when you look at this. This is a tetrahedron. And when you look at the Star of David, it's like two triangles, one looking up, one looking down. And when you look at a Merkaba, which is that put into 3 dimensions, it's two tetrahedrons, one looking up, one looking down. This is the same thing, but I like this one because one is inside the other one. So like, let's say this big one out here, this is God. And inside it, there's a tetrahedron in there as well. And so that would be creation, basically, that tetrahedron. And that tetrahedron is looking up. It's looking out, is what that really means. Because up is not really real. Up means out. Like when they say spin up and spin down, it's like in physics, it's spin out and spin in. Remember, inside, outside, separate oneness. So this one inside is looking up, which really means it's looking out. And the one in God is looking down, but really this means looking in. It's looking inside himself because that's where creation is, but we observe it in the hierarchy as him looking down at us because that's where we are in the hierarchy. We're below. So, but the two tets is the two tetrahedrons, and when there's unity between them, that is the Messianic era. It's when the heavens comes to earth. Like, it makes sense that the Metatron would be the two tets. It's the two tets when they're working together. Like right now, you might be self-aware, but like we haven't achieved that yet for like humanity. Otherwise it would be the Messianic era. That would be the ultimate manifestation of, the growth structure. With the two tets it's parent-child, father-son. That's what it is. And when there's unity between them, like, there you go. But this structure, let me see here. And then I'm gonna go, but I highly recommend you check out what I'm about to show you. Okay. This is the Elementary Particle Explorer, and it lets you look at all kinds of things. So this is E8. And you can maneuver this around and look at it from all different perspectives. This is creation. Interestingly enough, look at this. So, remember, there's 4 primary perspectives. Let's say this is one being. Okay, this is God. There's 4 primary perspectives that God has. And you have to work from the outside in. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? When you look at my work, or where is it? You start here, 1, and then within that you have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so and then we have to go within that again. So what does this claim? Is it within that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, let's look. Within these, it's this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. But within the 9, there's only 6 perspectives here, because some of they're separate and separate, inside and inside, outside and outside. But it's singularity, inside, separate, oneness within, outside, and oneness without. That's 6. Okay, so now we move back to E8. We realize that these 3 and these 3 are the 6 reflecting across an intrinsic constraint, because this is a triality, this is a triality, and this is a triality, but they're really also a binary, or you could also say they're 2 sides of one coin. So what is a coin? It's heads and tails. Okay, you could also say it's a coin. It's one coin is a binary of heads and tails, and when you add that coin perspective to the heads perspective and the tails perspective, then you get a triality: heads, tails, and a coin, just like past, present, and future. Past and future reflecting across the present, or forwards and backwards are reflecting across your current location. This is what you're starting to see here, and you can see even that this is 1, 2, and they're reflecting across this intrinsic constraint. And when you look at this pattern here, now let's look at the 64 tetrahedron grid, which is manifest, by the way, obviously, as I showed in my work here. There's 64 red squares here, 64 gaps here, which are red, and 64 gaps here that are red. Solid, liquid, and gas. Doesn't matter. And then when you completely entangle them, you get 720 degrees of rotation, which is, there's 720 little squares in each verse. When you take into account, and I know that looks like a snake, I did that on purpose. It's once on a stream, and it's a snake going like this. It's pretty amazing. But when you take a verse into the context of it coming from and leading to another one, you can see it's 720 degrees of rotation. So we're getting, which is exactly what the fermions have to do, or what spinors have to do in physics in order to come back to their original state. So it's, if this is the original state, and then to come back to here, you have to go through 720 little things here. Even our degrees of rotation are discrete, and the reason why it's 720 is because 360 is to go all around you, and which is interesting because that's 9 where there's also like, it's split where like 6 and 3, or 3 and 6, which is like, it's like, if everything is a 9-dimensional event like this, or Every0ne, that essentially, then basically and God puts 1/3 of his energy into creation and keeps 2/3 for himself, it makes sense that like 36 is kind of a number that would pop up. But what it is that it's looking all around you and then looking above you and below you. It's the universe looking at itself from the inside out and from the outside in at the same time. It's us looking out and God looking in at the same time. That is the two tets. But back to this real quick. Remember this structure. Just take a look at it. Okay. Now look at this. The 64 tetrahedron grid. The fact that they ignore Nassim Haramein is a crime. Look at it. It's exactly what we just looked at. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then contained within it is 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The little like, right, the joints. I'm not talking about this square or this square, but it's interesting that it's like 4 points contain these 9 points, and these 9 points contain 4 like 4 squares. They ignore Nassim Haramein, and he came up with that. Frickin' genius. That is as genius as coming up with my cosmological verse. It's the same structure. It's just looking at the scaffolding of it versus, the walls and windows and everything like that I filled in. I put the walls up and the windows, and he had this and the scaffolding, but we did it independently. I didn't try and even do that. I just looked at it and I was like, wow, he did that, and they still ignore him. I sent a message to Brian Keating and I was like, maybe one day have like Nassim Haramein on or Clea Irwin. That would be like pretty amazing. And didn't hear back. And the reason, and I kind of predicted that a little bit because, and I'm not saying I'll never hear back, but Brian gets back to me like usually within the day. And is because it's one thing to have a flat earther on, because he was like, should I have a UFOologist or should I have a flat earther on? And I sent him a private message and I was like, maybe have somebody who's not, going on, who's totally, I don't remember what I said, but the point is that maybe have somebody on that isn't going on there just to have you like as an opposition to you. If Flat Earther goes on Brian Keating's show, he's not going on Brian Keating's show because people think that Brian Keating is a Flat Earther. But if Nassim Haramein goes on Brian Keating's show, it means that Brian Keating is giving a little bit of legitimacy, is acknowledging, he's not giving, only God gives legitimacy. He's acknowledging a little bit of legitimacy of Nassim Haramein. Whereas for Brian Keating to have a Flat Earther on, it's more of the gag. But the reality is gags on him and Flat Earther because the Earth is neither flat nor a sphere. It's our position that determines it. So, two fools arguing. And I like Brian a lot. He's brave, and that's the most important quality in any scientist. But I just hope one day he's brave enough to have Nassim Haramein on his show. But, and he's a good guy. But the Earth is not a sphere, objectively. All right, let me look at the final questions, and then we're going to go. But, oh, look at this real quick. E6. We go like physics here. You go like spin 10. Wait, let's just reload this. Did he get rid of it? Weird. Got rid of it. Interesting. They used to have... Oh, wait, no. Here, look. Boom. There we go. Do you see that? Do you see what that is? The spin... That's the E6 cosector, I guess. I don't know what that means, but it's E6. It's like, this is E8. E7. By the way, look, E7 looks almost chaotic, right? It's like at E7, it's chaos. Look at this. Look at that number compared to all the rest. Looks a little chaotic, doesn't it? Look where it is. Family, assembly of organisms. What's wrong with society right now? We're not getting married. We're not. We're choosing. We're not choosing, but we haven't realized that we need to choose to get married. And we're not choosing. We're just acting on our instincts, which are not in accordance with our environment. It's causing chaos. And here you get the observation of chaos. It looks chaotic. There's not much order there. But when you back up, you kind of realize there is this greater order and symmetry. It's just that from this perspective, it doesn't look like this, and that creates the illusion of chaos. But then when you get to the next thing, order returns, beauty is observed again. And then once we get there, it's like, you know, beauty is there. Same thing as here. It's like once you go from here to here, you know, on the 8th day of Hanukkah, there's a miracle. Order returns. And then you get a union to get, you know, the Messiah, and then the Messiah restarts the system and does it again, which is exactly where we were here. 720 restarts the next universe within itself. Let there be light. Anyways, I always get on these streams, not always, but sometimes I get on these streams. Oh crap, you guys didn't see any of that. Let me show you real quick. Shit. This. I was looking at this. E6. Did you even see the E8 thing? I mean, looked. Oh man, that sucked. I should have checked if you guys were seeing what I was looking at. Okay, well, basically, we're looking at this. This is the Particle Explorer, and you can look at all these particles. They are all arranged in an EA pattern by Garrett Lisi, and you can maneuver. I think I showed you how, like, I think you guys did see how I related it to Nassim Armain. I think I did show you guys that. But look at this. That's what I wanted to show you. That's all you missed. That is the Star of David. It's the two tets, one looking down, one looking up. But we see it as down and up because that's the only way for us to like view it, but it's in and out. With that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the binary triality. You can like maneuver on this website, which here, that's the website. Differential geometry .org slash EPE, Elementary Particle Explorer is what that stands for. And then you can mess around with this stuff, and you can like see structures that there's an Asim Harmenge, structure again from one perspective. But from a certain perspective, there is a Star of David. But then look at that. That's another weird structure. You can kind of like see all these dimensions and spaces that are formed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Interesting. Look at that. Like, this is amazing. It's amazing. Like, you wouldn't expect this, but then as you rotate it, look at how it fits together like a puzzle. It's a hexagon, which is a cube with 4 sides on each, which is 8 cubes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. Wow. It's really hard to maneuver this thing sometimes. Oh, my mouse is like linked to it. Yeah, I can't like get out of it for some reason. But you can see it's just freaking amazing. But it's the Star of David from one perspective, making another one within itself. It's just amazing. I wonder how many triangles you'd find there. It's counting. This is 4 though. This is 4. 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 So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6 triangles times 4. It's 24. Interesting. Anyways, play with that if you guys are interested. I definitely recommend it. But you can see all these patterns also in my work. They just manifest differently. So, this E8, because there's 8 periods, you can see that just like here, when you look at E7, it looks chaotic. It doesn't have the order that E6 does or the order that E8 does. It's chaos. Looks like something's wrong. That's exactly what you kind of see here. It's like order, 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 chaos. Back to order, and then restart. It's just fascinating. It's how I know that I discovered, it's one of the reasons why I know I discovered the E8 structure in this. There it is. Gorgeous. I think that's the most, I look at that, I'm like, that's the most beautiful structure I've ever seen. And it's because, and mathematicians say the same thing. They're like, E8 is the most beautiful structure. It's like, this is E8. It's just a different 2-dimensional version of it. But, I haven't even counted yet, like, if I counted that as 1, each L as 1, I wonder what I would get. Oh, no, I know what I would get. 162. I've already done that. But because it's the same count as counting the cubes. Or counting the squares. And 162 is 3 times 6 times 9. It's like, you can't even reconcile Tesla's, like, crazy great predictions of science until you do these type of models. And then you can reconcile Tesla's models with, E8. And Garrett Lisi and Tesla can, like, have some peace. Anyways, I am going to get off now, but it's always interesting where these things go. What I was going to say before I change subjects again is that I sometimes don't know what I am going to, like, exactly discuss on here. And then I go and I get on and I'm like, or before, a few hours before, like, I always find something beforehand, but before I find something to talk about, before I get on the stream, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I just can't think of anything to talk about. Well, 4 hours later, here we're at. It's like, of course you can find something to talk about. The theory of everything. Metatron, the youth, a title previously used in 3 Enoch where it appears to mean the servant. Yep, exactly. It identifies him as the angel that led people of Israel through the wilderness after their exodus from Egypt and describes him as a heavenly priest. Interesting. Well, with that, I thank you all again for being here. Hit the like button, share this, cut this up into clips, put the clips up. If I said anything at any point that was like, you were like, that's legit, I wish other people saw that, post it somewhere. Make a Theory of Everyone's Clips channel if you want, and that would be awesome. And if you want to see more of my work, go to sentientsingularity.com. Please scroll down to the bottom and subscribe to my email list. I do not send out emails often, but like with the topics that we got into yesterday, which I want to talk about, they're not going to let us stay on YouTube long. So I would love to be able to keep in touch with everybody. Also, if you have not joined our Discord, message me and I will get you a link. Message me on Instagram and I will send you a link to the Discord and you can join. So follow me on Instagram, Tyler Goldstein and Theory of Everyone. Both are two channels or 2 pages. And then I also have my website, like I said. There's a Patreon link down below, and subscribe to my other YouTube channel too, Tyler Goldstein, because I want to talk about how we can use these to impact our society, and it's going to relate to gender. And last guy that talked a lot about gender, Stefan Molyneux, that guy's gone. So, and if you're going to talk about gender and nationality, I mean, he talked about both too, but I don't know, like, he's gone. So subscribe to my email list. All right. Thanks, guys. Peace.